first item of business is public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to make a public comment? Seeing none. Second item of business is a request by the staff to reconsider the motion of item 9 from September the 2nd HLC meeting.
Good afternoon. I'm Anand, Senior Planner. I wanted to explain why staff had made this request, to give you a little bit of background. I apologize for not being here 2 weeks ago. But the premise of why we requested a reconsideration is that under our municipal code, section 2294, 030, which or 040, which states that there are specific uses allowed in the city with a conditional use permit, and one of those uses happens to be cellular facilities, antennas, and what they call a microcell. And this application that you reviewed citywide for NextG fell under the microcell provisions. And well, let me explain what microcell is. First of all, there's a definition for microcell. It does usually involve a smaller antenna, but the microcell definition also involves associated cabinets and equipment, and that's really what the problem is on these applications. As you know, you saw the mock-ups that were presented for you and the ABR, and both commissions are struggling with the associated equipment with these microcells, the things and necessary to convey these uses and communication devices that are strapped onto the power poles. So what we are advising the boards to do is to take a action and primarily directed to the Planning Commission for if you cannot direct the applicant to minimize or lessen the visual impacts to what is acceptable, then they don't qualify under an exemption for a conditional use permit. In other words, in applications past, we've usually had our boards work with the applicants to find a solution to camouflage the equipment. And that usually involves a building. In this case, it happens to be in the right-of-way. So we have an infrastructure that is already visually impacting the city, and they were adding additional infrastructure. And so this commission made a motion to deny the application, finding it was inconsistent with the El Pueblo Viejo district. That's fine to conclude that in your conclusions for indicating to the applicant that it is unacceptable. That let me just quote the ordinance. It says that the commission for properties located in the El Pueblo Viejo landmark district may take action regarding the location of the antennas on the site, color, and size of the proposed antennas so as to minimize any adverse visual impacts. In other words, you can give direction saying it's not acceptable, your proposal has not been designed to minimize those adverse visual impacts, and therefore it's unacceptable. And the applicant has the choice to come back and further hide and lessen those visual impacts, or go on to the Planning Commission, knowing that the record clearly indicates that this commission is opposed to this visual clutter on the power poles. So I would ask this commission to reconsider your denial with the understanding that this applicant has a choice to come back with a different proposal and or pursue that land use approval with the Planning Commission. So does everyone understand that sort of direction? Just to let you know that the ABR also reviewed the application, and they were advised. They also did not find the proposals acceptable, and went as far as saying they wanted it all underground. So it's a pretty strong statement from our boards about what this carry has to do to get these views lessened or visual impacts lessened. So I asked the Commission to consider that reconsideration. It would be the prevailing side, whoever made the motion, someone to open it up for reconsideration and have a vote, and then open it up and hopefully rephrase your comments into what you find not acceptable.
would it be appropriate to rephrase the comments without the applicant present?
Yes, the applicant is aware that we were placing this item on, and there is actually going to be an official city attorney opinion on how we interpret this section. They have a different interpretation of their approval process within the city. Since it's a little unique that they are being governed by the Public Utilities Commission, so they've had some reviews and approvals through that agency as a public utility. So we will have some additional guidance for you when the application returns.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to reconsider the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries.
So then the comment will be to continue the application indefinitely with a comment that the Commission does not find the current proposal acceptable and in character with the Pueblo Viejo Landmark District.
We had the suggestion that they be placed on the ground.
Yes, please. That will be your second?
Yes.
Okay. That's the motion. There's a second.
All those in, or
Could you read out them? Could you please read it out just so we hear it, please?
Could we have a reading of the motion for our clarification?
To amend the motion for item 9 citywide of the September 2nd, 2009 HLC meeting as follows. To continue the item to the Architecture Board review with the comment that... No, okay, I'm sorry.
Just continued indefinitely.
Continued indefinitely. The commission does not find the current proposal acceptable for the El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District.
And recommends that the applicant study placing all equipment underground.
Did I call for a vote? I cannot remember. I'll call for all those in favor.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item would be the approval of the minutes for September the 2nd, 2009. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Do I have any comments or revisions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
item 5, 2010 Emerson Avenue, I'm listed as abstaining. On the motion, I agree completely with the motion, and I would like to change that abstention to a yes vote. I abstained was by mistake.
I see.
Is that possible?
It's fine. What number was it?
It's page 8.
Oh, page 8.
The motion of item 5, the historic structure report.
Okay. So you're voting.
I agree. I'm one of the unanimous.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or?
Yes.
Oh, good.
This is on page 8. It's item 6128 East Cannon Perdido Street, item 6. And in the motion, it should read as follows. I think the item 1 is vague. Anyway, it says consider the landscape comments made, and I want to say including improving the landscaping for the central open space instead of consolidation or resolution. That's we asked them to do additional work in that area, and it really is an improvement of the landscaping in the central open space. So that should read, consider the landscape comments made, including improving the landscaping for the central open space.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like I remember the term consolidation referred to the fact that there were 2 islands, and we want them to consider making them one big island altogether. That's where the term consolidation comes. So if you can leave something there, including making it, yeah.
Including the consolidation of the 2 separate items and the improvement of the landscaping for the central open space. How's that?
Islands, not islands.
Yes.
Islands.
Mr. Limon, may I ask you, given our previous discussion about minutes and rewriting certain things, do you consider this to be out of bounds?
The motion, I didn't get the real, I don't have the minutes in front of me, so I would need to have it reread to determine how different it would be. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
And the change was
including the consolidation of the two separate islands and the improvement of landscaping in the central open space.
I think that is consistent
So
with
that
the
is within
direction. Yes, that'd be
Okay.
fine.
So clarification of the intent of a statement is, thank you. Are there any other comments or additions or revisions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as
Aye.
opposed, abstain, that motion carries. The next item of business is the consent calendar.
Yes, Madam Chair, item A, 536 State Street, was continued for 2 weeks. Item B, 1829 State Street, was final approval as submitted. Item C, 1727 Prospect Avenue, was final approval with a condition. Item D, 424 State Street, was final approval as submitted. Item E, 1127 State Street, final approval as submitted with a condition. 213 Paseo Nuevo was final approval as noted. And item G, 911 Laguna Street, was indefinitely continued. Those items were reviewed by Commissioner Schallenberger.
May I ask? Oh, he's not here. The location of the backflow device at 424 State Street, where is it? Right out in front?
I'd have to go pull the file and show it to you. I don't know where. I don't remember where. I think it's in the Parkway Strip.
East Haley side.
It's in the public right of way.
It's set back.
You want to? Mr. Limon had looked at it before it was submitted.
Okay, well, you
Yes.
know me and these things.
No, we had a proposal to place it right at the sidewalk, and we asked the applicant to consider getting a landscape plan to set it back. I had requested it behind the wall. There's a small wall off the Haley side parking lot, and they're actually cutting the wall and insetting the device in with a hedge in front of it, so it will have some screening.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to ratify the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Next item is announcements or requests by applicants for continuance and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Curtis has resigned from the Historic Landmarks Commission effective September 8th. So the next recruitment for boards and commissions opens at the end of September, with interviews in November and appointments in December. Commissioner Schallenberger will be coming in around 2:30 today. And there will be an Historic Landmarks Commission 5-year goals subcommittee meeting in the Fishbowl Conference Room at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, September 23rd. And I believe Mr. Limon has an announcement.
Yes, so along those lines regarding the goals document, that document will be sent out to you in your next package of information after we meet with the subcommittee, hopefully to work with the base document that staff prepared. And I would ask Commission to think carefully about what type of goals and objectives this Commission would like to see in the next 5 years, with the idea of prioritizing what we would like to be working on. It sort of gives us additional direction to forward these directives up to management and the city administrator to try to prioritize our program. The subcommittee will primarily be looking at what staff developed along with any ideas that you can forward to the subcommittee members, which is Chair Naylor, Mr. Peugeot, and Murray, Commissioner Murray. So if you have any ideas, we can include those. And then we'll look at prioritization as we speak with respect to the discussion item that we placed in 2 weeks. In addition, We do have the Mills Act that has actually been drafted, an ordinance, and we'll be providing you a council agenda report to give you some more information. That is on for next Tuesday at City Hall for introduction. So we're very excited about having the Mills Act, and hopefully we'll have some applicants come forward. And if you didn't catch this, we prepared a video. Myself and Jake were involved with a Inside Santa Barbara piece, right, which documented our proposal and has some very good information regarding the Mills Act. And it had, which house was it? Which house was it that we had visited? Hunstown House. So we had a quick tour of that with the applicant just to show how the restoration is occurring, as well as advocating that we have some historic districts that this program could be beneficial to these property owners. So we're excited about that.
Thank you.
So commissioners are welcome to attend on Tuesday.
It's just for introduction. They're not discussing.
It's introduction. There'll be a discussion, and then the adoption would follow in the following week. So
Okay,
there would be a discussion.
So do you know, be in the afternoon?
Yes, and we'll let you more information about the
Because I'd
timing.
like to be there if they're going to
Sure.
discuss it.
Thank you. Last item is subcommittee reports. I think Mr. Schallenberger was going to report on the El Encanto hearing, but he's not here, so.
He's actually said he could report later when he gets here, or it could be 2 weeks out. So it's however the schedule goes today.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
Mr.
we had a
Jacobus.
meeting this morning of the survey. Was it the survey subcommittee?
It was the survey subcommittee. We discussed issues surrounding this 5-year plan also, and we also are doing a little homework on establishing a list of our 20 most prioritized buildings that we'd like to see landmarked in the city.
Oh,
And we'll be coming forward to you with that at some point in the near future.
thank you.
Madam Chair, I have an announcement. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, between 7 and 9, in the Faulkner Gallery, the Santa Barbara Conservancy and the Citizens Planning Association are jointly hosting a forum for 11 of the 13 council candidates that can come. And the topic is going to be preservation of our historic structures and resources in Santa Barbara. And then next Wednesday night, the 23rd, we are having the same forum to include 5 of the 5 mayoral candidates to also discuss preservation of our historic structures. So we're looking forward to.
The next Thursday one, is that?
Tomorrow night is the Thursday and the 17th, and then next week is the 23rd,
23rd.
Wednesday, also at the Faulkner, also between 7 and 9.
Thank you. Any other reports or comments? Seeing none, let's go to the first item, which is the archaeology report for 318 State Street.
Madam Chair, I'm Michael Berman. I'm the environmental analyst for the city. I reviewed the archaeological report for this project. It was an unusual situation because a phase 1 archaeological assessment has already been prepared and accepted for the site and accepted by this commission. The report that was prepared this time round amended the original report because the project is different to the original project that was anticipated. Dr. Glassow reviewed the report and he had a little concern about some privies that are on the property. I, as a part of my responsibility, am charged with implementing the Master Environmental Assessment and CEQA for the city. And I'd like to bring your attention to Section 1.3 of that of those guidelines, and it's quoting from CEQA Section 21083.2. And what it says is that an important archaeological resource is one that there is a high probability that it meets the criteria that it contains information needed to answer important scientific research. It has a special particular character, such as it being the oldest of its type or the best available example of its type, or it is directly associated with a scientifically recognized important prehistoric or historic event. Dr. Glassow was indicating some concern about some privies that are historic times that are located that may be located on the site. Unfortunately, the consultant was unable to conclude that there was a high probability that they contained this information. So to address Dr. Glassow's concerns, the addendum requires that excavation in the area of the privies be monitored by an archaeologist. However, under CEQA, it's not a significant impact, and that's the only reason I'm here, is just to point that out and to answer any questions you may have about this report. I've approved it. As far as I'm concerned, it's adequate. It meets the MEA requirements as it is, and I believe it meets Dr. Glassow. Dr. Glassow reviewed the first version of this report. He hasn't seen the latest version, but I am convinced it addresses his concerns because the resource is protected.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I did have a problem with them referring to the buried privies are not evaluated as unique or significant.
Would you refer to a page?
I'm sorry, that's on page 14, the third paragraph under the evaluation. I mean, if they haven't been evaluated, it seems a little odd to say that there's no problem with them.
Madam Chair, I again bring your attention to Section 1.3 of the MEA and CEQA Section 21083.2. The reason they are not evaluated is because the archaeologist has no knowledge that there is a high probability that it meets the criteria I mentioned earlier.
I understand that.
So that's our charge as the MEA. We need to follow what the Master Environmental Assessment says. The resource is protected anyway, but under CEQA and our MEA guidelines, we cannot say that it's a significant resource.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Well, sir, so is there any protection if, as the grading begins, is there any protection for potential treasure troves that may be hidden in these privies?
There are two levels of protection here. The first one is the minimal. We always require that the construction contractor be notified that if any archaeological resources are uncovered during excavation, that they cease construction in that area. Notify the environmental analyst, and qualified archaeologist needs to study the resource to see if they're in fact significant. The second level in this particular report is also that in the area of and we have pretty good information where those privies were because they mapped, that that excavation would be monitored by a qualified archaeologist. So as I said, the resources are protected, and we don't have a very strong suspicion that there's important information in that area. So that's why it is. And if you look at the report, there's another issue too, is many of these privies have already been disturbed, looted. Yes, thank you. And although they can contain good information, in this time period they are fairly rare. There's no strong evidence that that they have a high potential for containing information. And if we had to protect every resource that had some potential, it would be prohibitively expensive. So we have to cut off somewhere. And that's where CEQA and our MEA guidelines cut it off. So I'm just following the guidelines.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Make a motion to accept your report.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Thank you. The next item is the Historic Structures Report for 34 West Victoria Street. To introduce yourselves for the record and press it in the middle. It'll be bright green.
There we go. Pamela Post, author of the report from Post Hazeltine Associates.
Thank you.
Tim Hazeltine, Post Hazeltine Associates, co-author.
Thank you. Jake?
Madam Chair. I've read the report. I did most of my work prior to taking a short vacation, and when I came back, didn't have a chance to go over it with a fine-tooth comb. But it looks like they made the changes and the clarifications that staff requested. I do have two small issues. If you could please turn to page 39.
There.
The last sentence of the bottom paragraph where it says, the center of the complex will feature 3 freestanding clusters of buildings flanked on the north side. The word clusters, I think, is deceiving there because the definition of a cluster is a group of the same or similar elements, which would sound like that there's 3 groups of buildings within. There's actually 3 buildings. So I would like to have the word clusters of struck so that it's not deceiving in this description. The buildings are irregularly shaped, but they're definitely 3 footprints. And then the same thing occurs if we go to page 48, the center of the page under analysis. In all fairness to the Pikert project, it says the Arlington Village project will consist of 5 clusters of primarily 3-story buildings. There again, I think the word clusters of should be removed. It's 5 primarily 3-story buildings. They're irregularly shaped, but there again, the definition of a cluster is a group of similar or same items grouped together. And it makes it sound like there's much more buildings on the site than there actually are. But with those 2 corrections, staff is happy with the report, and I'll pass it on to you for your consideration.
Thank you. Do you wish to say anything before I go further? Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will come to questions from the Commission, please. Ms. Murray?
Yes. I wanted to know, would you say the mural is the definitive example of Jan Knoll's work in the area and all of his work? Would you say that's the epitome of his work, of an example of his work?
Oh, well, I certainly would say that it's an excellent example of his work, and of course one of the reasons that we found it significant, and that the building in itself is not historic, but the panels certainly meet that criteria. Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, is that the very art that associates him to be as a landmark worthy art?
Oh, you mean does that define him?
Is that the definitive kind of art that defines him as important artist?
Well, I mean, no, because he was certainly well known even before World War II. So, and this comes towards, I would say, the end of his life, as a artist. Yeah. I mean, is that what you're saying, where it fits within his chronology of artistic?
No, I guess I'm just wondering if someone who did not know this person, if you were to introduce him, would you use this art
as an example?
His major work?
No, not necessarily. No, because he was very, quite eclectic and varied in his work. So I wouldn't find this as his, culmination of his work. Yeah, important, but not, in that respect. No.
Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Drury.
To acknowledge Mr. DeForest's letter.
Yes.
I think that qualifies as public comment.
I will read, and I apologize for that. That is correct. We did receive communication from Mr. DeForest. He said, this is an email sent late last night. Dear Susan, Jake kindly gave me a copy of the post-Hazeltine Historic Structures Report. I wish I could attend the HLC meeting tomorrow afternoon. Blank, blank, blank. Please distribute my comments. Comments on the Historic Structures Report, page 11, 6.7, Modernism. Quote, during the mid-1950s, State Street was extended from Constance Avenue to Modoc Road, end of quote. This is misleading. In 1950, State Street was extended to Hollister Avenue at the De La Vina Y. Hollister Avenue to Modoc Road was renamed State Street. On page 12, 6.8, Santa Barbara Art Scene. whose mural at the Santa Barbara Public Library, end of quote. Should the fact that this mural was saved from destruction when the library was remodeled in 1978 be included? The mural was moved from an exterior patio to the library's entrance corridor. One of the reasons it was put inside was it didn't conform to EPV guidelines. Page 17, the Arlington Theater, quote, the Fox Arlington was one of the most impressive movie places of its time, end of quote. It still is. It is listed as one of the 10 most significant extant movie palaces in the United States. Page 42, 10.3.3, Project Impacts. The Joseph Knowles murals, as demonstrated in the report, do have historic and artistic merit, but they do not belong in El Pueblo Viejo. If the EPV had existed in 1959, your commission would not have permitted them. The murals fly in the face of the EPV guidelines. Since the proposal is to move them anyway, they could be moved to any suitable wall outside of the EPV. Also, they might be moved to an interior wall similar to the Peak Warshaw mural. Page 46, impacts of the overall view shed of the Arlington South elevation, end of quote. I agree that the existing bonds hampers the impact of the south side of the Arlington from Victoria Street. The problem is that 3-story condos will diminish the impact more. As always, post-Hazeltine prepare fine reports. I learned a lot from the history of supermarkets I hadn't known before. Thank you, Kellum DeForest. Thank you, Mr. Drury. I had forgotten. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just on one thing, it's off the subject, I know, but on the mural at the library. When a new librarian came to Santa Barbara and it was decided that they were going to do the addition, his desire was that the wall with the mural on it, the outside patio, be eradicated. However, I think that the Landmarks Committee and Dr. Gebhardt fought very, very hard to have them moved inside, where they have been ever since, much to all of our joy. Okay, so it wasn't because they weren't acceptable in EPV, because they'd been there for some time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, one quick,
Yes.
On the first comment that Mr. DeForest mentioned, the report says the mid-50s. That's correct. In his second sentence, when he says in 1950 State Street, it wasn't 1950, it was the mid-50s.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
To further that, we recently had, when we had the Y issue come up at one of the subcommittees, I pulled out some 1952 aerial photographs, and in 1952 the road did not go through, so Mr. Sharp is correct. It was mid-50s.
Thank you. Kellum. Okay.
Madam Chair?
yes.
I'm sorry, while I've got your attention, I just wanted to once again clarify that you're approving a report and the conclusions and findings of this report, which the report says that a set of buildings of this massing and size would not negatively impact the historic resources. You're not approving the exact plans that are in this diagram, and you'll have a chance to rework those as time goes. So I just want to make sure that we separate those two issues. The plan's separate issue, and the report is what we're just looking for your approval or recommendations on right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, we'll go to comments. Are there any comments?
It's a wonderful report. I learn a lot. I follow it. I like the way you analyze the impacts from all the different angles and the impacts on all the different buildings in the vicinities. So I have no problems with the report. I like it very much.
Thank you.
I also want to compliment all these different subjects and surrounding buildings. You did a very thorough job on that part of the report, so it's much appreciated.
Thank you. Further comments?
I also commend the historians for monumental report. I really appreciated all of the study and analysis of the view sheds. However, I cannot agree with the conclusion of the report that the cumulative effects of these proposed projects are not going to have a negative impact, are not going to have an impact on the theater. I also strongly believe that it's not just the view sheds that need to be protected. I think all of the character defining parts of the Arlington, which are very well enumerated on page, I think it's on page 44, should all be protected at all costs. And I find that the report did not address the spatial relationships of these proposed buildings to the Arlington. To me, they are just so close. They are just so, there's no breathing space between the south side of the Arlington. Part of the market comes to block the rear of the Arlington, and I feel strongly that that should be open. I am also very concerned about the view sheds from the corner of Chapala and West Victoria. I was not thoroughly convinced without story poles, without further redesign, that is not going to be an impact. I'm concerned about the clubhouse and the bridge. I think that's going to be a big impact on the sense of its spatial relationship, not just the views, but it's the relationship of the masses of the Arlington and the market and the street and to the pedestrian. I also, when I look at the 3-story buildings near the Arlington, and while I appreciate that they're in the center of the lot, I am concerned that they are going to have a sort of a fortress effect, and they will indeed impact that sort of a clear massing of the Arlington building that has these very simple ornaments. The other part that I'm concerned about is on the Arlington Village, for one thing that works for the Arlington Village project, despite their huge other buildings, which I don't agree with, is their open space. They're making use of that green open space, and I would just like for this project to look into something to relieve that south side of the Arlington, so you have a sense of symmetry between these two projects. I also would like the project to really look at the West Victoria elevation. I really appreciated that it's 2-story, and the heights are good, but once again, it's just going to be a wall of buildings. There is not going to be a little view from the street level to that side of the Arlington. So I guess really in the end, my biggest concerns are there is no spatial relationships. The density of the projects bothers me because if you look at this picture, and this is very well presented in the report. There's a picture. It's a figure 7. I'm gonna pull it out of the old Arlington. And if you look at it, the reason why these buildings really work and they're high, but we don't get that sense of overwhelmness, is because of the green open space. And the courthouse is like that. The reason why it really is monumental is because there is this sense of open space are all surrounding the buildings. And this is not happening in this project. And yet, I really believe that Arlington, next to the courthouse, is the other most important landmark in the city. So I really would like this project to really consider those. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I haven't absorbed all that you said, Fermina, but I certainly agree with you. I think that we're putting too close to the Arlington here. It's just, and I don't think that's really addressed. I think the space between the project and the theater is minimal, and I don't think it's going to be a very pleasant space in light of it being, should we say, open space.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
We can vote to accept the report, but not agree with the conclusions. Is this correct?
I don't think.
I don't think
we've
so.
been doing that.
No, you cannot.
Okay.
Okay. Madam Chair, page 49, it says the report evaluated the proposed mixed-use project and determined that it will not significantly impact historic resources if the project description is implemented. I guess I would disagree with that statement, saying that it would impact historic resources if the project description is implemented. I mean, for me, that's the statement that again, a lot of wonderful information in this report, but I don't necessarily agree with that conclusion made on page 49.
Thank you.
That is also my concern too. So if there is a way to make a motion where the report is accepted but all other conditions, I don't know how that could be worked out.
I'll just clarify this. If I understand it, if we don't agree with conclusions, we are not accepting the report.
That would be correct. What the option would be to ask to have either more analysis done in the report to where it would make the commission agree, or if the project is to be refined based on your comments, because you'll be reviewing the project after this issue. Based on your comments, the project gets refined, and then they can analyze the refined project and come back with the report at that point.
Yeah, I probably would suggest that we table the report, review we've done this before too, where, take no action on the report, review the project, because, otherwise nothing is going to be reconciled. I don't know.
I'll just share with you what I want to see. I want to see this report acknowledge that this project will have impacts. For me, they don't have to say significant, but it has to acknowledge the impact.
Class 3.
What's that?
I don't think they're Class 3 impacts. I think they're much.
May I ask the applicant or the historians?
To respond?
Yes.
Yes, the conclusionary statements on page 49, we're using significant as someone I think noted, CEQA terminology to say that the impacts, is our conclusion that those impacts are not significant under CEQA. If they were significant under CEQA, they would either be significant and unmitigatable or significant and mitigatable. What we're saying is the project as generally designed doesn't significantly, for the purposes of CEQA review, so impact the ability of the Arlington to convey its historic architectural style or historic significance. And so that is really our conclusion. And our baseline for the analysis of the view sheds and inherently the spatial relationship of the new project to the old, to the existing resource is, we took into account that the existing sort of configuration of that area has only existed since 1958-59 when the market was built. And previous to that, there was a market on the corner that, as we noted in the report, blocked views. Essentially, the market that's being proposed is similar to the footprint to some extent, with the exception of the rear elevation, which we acknowledge, the rear part, it occupies a space that was occupied by a building. So the existing view sheds have existed in large part since 1958. It's not historic in the sense that the Arlington was designed to be surrounded by undeveloped space. That existed from the completion of the Arlington in 1930 until the market was built in 1933, because there was a market built in 33, which was subsequently demolished in 58 and replaced by the existing market. So in our consideration from a preservation standpoint, the existing configuration is not historic. With the market in that place, with that existing, some of those existing view sheds don't have the same level of historic significance as ones that have existed since the inception of the Arlington Theater building. And we also looked at the project in terms of if you developed anything in these spots, even if you just built in the area the market is now, new buildings, you're going to be blocking view sheds. And our consideration was there a sufficient amount of what is character defining about the Arlington still visible that it would read as the Arlington, that the passerby would go, yes, that's the Arlington Theater, I can still recognize it. Its major character defining features, such as the Paseo that links it with Victoria Street, the tower, a good part of the second floor fenestration was still visible. In our estimation, the theater was designed with the eventuality that there would be some development around that, and that's why the base of the building is fairly unrelieved by any sort of ornamentation, because it wouldn't be visible. And so we don't feel that's as significant as those other elements of the structure, the upper floors, the major embellished parts of the building, which were intended to always be sort of viewable. And so we took that into consideration in our analysis. So we didn't take the baseline as obscuring any more of the Arlington than it's obscured by the building constructed in 1958, 59 is our baseline. We didn't take that as our baseline in our analysis because we don't consider that existing view shed with that building to be particularly historic.
Thank you. Are there any further comments from the commissioners regarding this? And I just want to underline what Mr. Tim has just said. Remember that this is a CEQA assessment that they are making. It is not about whether there is a significant impact in your estimation as an aesthetic reason. You can still have that estimation, but they are making a CEQA estimation that is quite different.
I continue to support the report. I think that some views of the portions of the Arlington will be different, will be blocked, some areas. I don't think they are significant. I think that the analysis is correct. I will make a motion. I don't want to upset the natural course of events. If whatever is the way to move this forward, I would like to proceed that way. But I do support the report.
Would you like to make a motion?
I make the motion to approve the document as proposed, as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second? I will second that motion. I think I can. There's discussion among us, but I'm not sure that you're part of that. Jaime, is that...
You can allow him to speak to the motion. It's up to you. It's your prerogative.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Brian Cornell. I just want to reinforce the notion that, as the applicant here, we started this project working with highly qualified historians to shape a project that would not rise to the level of significance, that it would be less than significant, and we have molded the project working with Tim and Pam, and we've reached that point, and I think it's a dangerous proposition to cross the line into personal opinion versus historic expertise. And in our opinion, we hired the best to work with to shape a project that did not create an impact, and we've worked very hard to do that. So I hope we're not crossing that line into personal opinion.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Drury.
It evolves into personal opinion no matter how we phrase it, and all you have to do is drive up Chapala and look. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to also advise the Commission that as the chair alluded to, we're struggling with these determinations, and I think it would be advisable to separate the compatibility again of the building with the neighborhood versus the CEQA impacts. We recommended that with the last proposal on the other side of this, the landmark building. However, this commission determined that the view shed was being impacted and the historic setting was impacted. You have that ability to make those conclusions. In this proposal, I think there's some concern about the buffer and the proximity of the proposal development to the historic landmarks. We have a professional historian saying it doesn't rise to those CEQA level impacts, but as the project gets more review, ultimately you will have to make those compatibility findings saying how is this impacting the adjacent landmark, and you can in fact deny it or send comments to the Planning Commission. If this project goes to the Planning Commission, I believe it will, indicating that you don't believe it's compatible and stating why.
Correct. Thank you. So, yes.
If your second wasn't accepted?
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd just like to request the addition of the removal of the words clusters of
Yes.
in the motion on pages 39 and pages 48 respectively.
Thank you. Would the maker of the motion accept that? Yes. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Madam Chair, may I make a comment?
About the clusters?
No.
Oh, okay.
When Ms. Murray made the comment in regard to the courthouse and the Arlington, and certainly we recognize that as two of the most important monuments in the city, but they're two entirely different, functions, and the fact that also the courthouse was planned to have an open space, but the Arlington Theater was planned from the very beginning to be as a urban commercial space developed with commercial shops surrounding it. So they are two different entities with two different functions.
Thank you. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? That motion carries. Is there anything you need to have clarified about the motion? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is item number 3, concept review of 34 West Victoria Street.
That was sure a nice intro. There's a set of you guys.
If you could bring to the attention of the commission the compatibility.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, that's right. Thank you. Will you introduce yourselves for the record, please?
I am Brian Cornell. I'm with Marge Caffarelli, the project owner, and Joe Androlitis, my partner, and Bob Cunningham from Arcadia Studios, landscape architect.
Thank you. And before you start your presentation, I want to remind the commissioners how efficient our staff has been. And if you look up on the wall, you will see the analysis that we are charged to do in terms of project compatibility. This will remind you of what we are reviewing this project in terms of criteria. Thank you. Now, I also want to say that in terms of the minutes, so that we can remind the commissioners and the applicant that,
Yeah.
There are a lot of comments that we made in our motion, and I think it's important enough to read them again. Continued 4 weeks with the following comments. The project was found to be acceptable within the overarching guidelines of the general plan in terms of sustainability and the urban design guidelines. A, the salient aspects include the underground parking, the mixed-use character of the buildings, the commercial aspect on Victoria Street, its paseos, and general articulation of the architecture. B, the proposal is compliance with the zoning and the general mass, bulk, and scale standards. C, the sensitivity to the history of the site and the adjacent city landmark is appreciated. 2, in terms of density, A, the large areas of white stucco that give the feeling of mass and thick walls should remain as part of the proposal. B, the variation with the 2-story buildings is appreciated. C, allowing the possibility of better views by starting at a lower level of the street is appreciated. D, there should be more of a sense of openness so that the Arlington Theater does not feel crowded. At least 2 commissioners are concerned with the size, bulk, and scale of the proposed 3-story buildings near the Arlington. Maintain some view to the rear entryway of the Arlington Theater along Chapala Street. E, there should be more variation in the building frontages from the back of the sidewalk. Number 3, the market building. A, it would be preferred that the Safeway market not be replicated. B, restudy the proposed market so it is less contemporary and does not feel like a box that would crowd every inch of the site. C, the market should enhance the monumentality of the Arlington on the Chapala Street side. D, the windows on the Victoria Street elevation and near the entrance are too large. E, the concept of eyes upon the street should be part of the design with coffee shops and live-work activity on top of the workspaces on Victoria Street. F, provide elements that break the scale of the major buildings, such as queues or small spaces that would articulate the pedestrian experience. 4, in terms of the green roof, A, the effort to incorporate a workable green roof is appreciated. B, the way the green roof would impact the view of the Arlington should be analyzed so that it enhances but does not take away from the theater's monumentality. 5, landscaping. A, the general palette is appreciated. It was suggested that Canary Island date palms be incorporated into key spots as a framing device to relate contrast to the beauty of the Arlington. B, soften the edges of the property and the walls with more landscaping. C, one commissioner believes that the large skyline trees would interfere with the distance views to the Arlington and that trees between 15 and 20 feet would be more appealing. 6, the mural. The majority agreed that the orientation of the mural would be commented on once the historic structures report is prepared and reviewed. 2 commissioners believe it should blend with the pedestrian experience, and locating it on Chapala Street would not achieve this. Streetscape, it would be helpful to have a complete elevation from Victoria Street to Sola Street of this project with the proposed project to the north. This would give an idea of what both projects will look like with the Arlington Theater as a backdrop. I'll bet you all remembered those. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I will try to be brief so we can get to the meat of your comments. Just to really quickly review the project, we have the survey here if you want to review anything as far as grades. Currently there is a masonry wall that is right on the property line surrounding the old Safeway building, and of course a parking lot along Chapala, so Victoria, Chapala for orientation purposes. So all of our parking is underground. We basically are stepping this parking, underground parking, so that it is completely below grade from a Victoria Street perspective. This lower parking area will be the residential parking, and all of the storage units that are required for the residents are located down here. And then this underground parking is raised up to be more compliant with the grade at the Arlington, because as you know now it's really a hole in the ground, so we're more or less stepping these so they follow what would be the natural grade, more or less, of the Paseo that runs here off of Victoria. And this will be the commercial parking for the shops and for the market, so they have an elevator access that actually for some reason isn't showing in this plot that is right here, and I'll refer you to that. We're also providing, we're stepping this parking structure all the way back. In the case of the Paseo off Victoria, we've got a 10-foot setback. We have a almost 8-foot setback at the Arlington Theater side. And then we've tried to create notches, large notches, so we can get trees planted all the way around the project. So at the Victoria Street, it's 4 feet. It's not dimensioned, but it's a 4-foot setback. And we're also incorporating tree wells, so we're going to bring earth through the parking structure so that we can get trees of significant size in the middle of the project as well. So the first floor plan, as I said in our last review, we basically have 3 components to the project. One is the new market, which would be in the corner of Victoria and Chapala, in the place where that original 1938 market that Edwards and Plunkett designed. We have the 1- and 2-story shops
and units that are along Victoria, really trying to emulate the scale that is existing on Victoria now, both West Victoria and the first block of East Victoria. And then the third component is this village, which we have really taken. We've literally taken aerials of some of the Pueblos Blancos in Andalusia and tried to understand the scale of those and really create a sense of a small Andalusian village as the third component that is up against the Arlington. You can see in this plan, and Bob will touch base on the specifics of the landscaping when he presents his landscape plan, but you can see the amount of green, which again is not planter, but all the way down through the earth, because that line is the line of the parking structure below. We have, in addressing your comments kind of as I'm running through this, let me get those so I can refer to them. Where did they go? I'm sorry, I just had them. We're going to have to take a little break and where? It's not yellow, is it? Oh, there they are. Oh, I apologize. One of the first comments was about the variation in the storefronts. And what we've done is we've held back all of the storefronts initially to that 4-foot setback, and then we are assuming that we would undulate in and out from that. So we have some portions that come within 2 feet, which are more or less architectural elements, and we have windows that will be back in excess of 5 feet. So we do want to modulate this, and we're assuming that we'll continue to work with you, but we more or less have tried to pick up the same patterns and setback that exist again along the Victoria frontage that's on the other side of the project.
Sorry, Brian, is this the response to there should be more variation in the
Yes.
building frontages from
Yes.
the back of the sidewalk? I
Yes.
see.
And then as far as the market is concerned, because one of the major concepts here is relocating the mural to the Chapala Street side, we've maintained that existing setback, basically, that exists today from Victoria at Chapala, so there'll be that same amount of landscaping. And in fact, we're going to reuse all the sandstone, and because this is a stepping condition, or I should say a sloping condition at Chapala, we will have a sandstone base in the same way that there exists today. And then we have that same 4-foot setback for the market along Victoria. As I mentioned at the last hearing, this was one of the aspects of the project that came up with our initial review with Pam and Tim, and that was to by cutting the market entrance back at this angle, it greatly enhanced those views of the Arlington Tower particularly, and I'll show you those when we look at the 3D views. So we're replacing the market plus 3,000 square feet of additional commercial square footage, which will be the shops along Victoria. And then we have 38 residential units, 5 of which are affordable, 33 are market. Second floor plan shows the 3 units that are over the commercial building on Victoria, and then those portions of the Victoria frontage that are 1 story. We are proposing a small green roof that's on this leading edge that would address State Street, the eastern corner of the project. And then, as you recall, we're proposing to make the entire roof of the market a green roof, and it will essentially become the common open space for all of the residential units. So we do have a bridge that's linking from the main circulation portions of the residential project over to the roof, and we have a little clubhouse which, as you recall, was to allow residents of fairly small units to be able to have a place to entertain. So this is more or less a living room, kitchen, dining room space that residents will be able to rent if they have parties. We also have a monitor element to bring light into the market. I should mention at this point that we are actually pursuing, Marge is passionate about building a sustainable project, and we at this point are working on either LEED Gold or Platinum level of sustainability for this project, which is going to include gray water, rainwater detention and a lot of other things. This is the third floor footprint, so you can see the portions of the residential that are 2 stories by the roofs, and then the units that are 3 stories. And that is the roof plan. These are the elevations, which I'll go through quickly because I don't think they're as telling as some of the 3D views, but I think they do a good job to understand the scale of the project relative to the Arlington Theater. So you see the 1-story and 2-story massing along Victoria, the scale of the market, and then the market along Chapala. You'll note here on these elevations, we've studied this and decided to step the portion of the market that was closest to the corner, or the portion on the corner and that has the glass, that does not have the murals, down. And we've also introduced, as was recommended, an entrance off of Chapala. So now, instead of exclusively the market entrance being here off of the little plaza off Victoria, there will also be an entrance off of the Chapala Street side. Obviously, the rest of that facade are the murals. And actually, while I'm on that elevation, because you requested it, this was one of the last items in your minutes, was the streetscape. We did obtain from Piker Group the elevation of their project, and so at the same scale, then, this is the Chapala streetscape from Sola to Victoria with the 2 projects superimposed together. This is its 16th inch scale. So you can see the limit of the market here relative to the back of the Arlington Theater. The what? Yeah, she kind of stole Bob's thunder there, but in the back here is where we are proposing the Canary Island palms that Robert had recommended at the last hearing. Then we'll have a chance to go over that. So this is actually the elevation that is against the Arlington, if that makes sense. You can also see the back of the market. And then the elevation along the Paseo that goes from Victoria up to the entrance to the Arlington. This is the main pedestrian entrance into our little street system back in the residential units. This section shows clearly the notion of these stepping parking garages, so you can see it more or less allows us to create that sense of the existing grade. And this section shows how the ramp from the easement that is at the rear of the Arlington works. So we go down to the first level of parking and then ramp down again to that lower level. So this is actually looking at the elevation of the market from inside that courtyard space. So you're looking at, that's also basically that elevation. So you see those stairs are right there in this section. So this is the little clubhouse. This portion is a small little court that is built into that clubhouse element, and that, of course, is the main entrance to the market. These views, I think, help relative to, obviously, it's not the way anyone's going to view it unless you are flying over the project, but I think they begin to give a good sense of that, our strong notion of the 3 elements of this project. So that is, obviously, the corner of Victoria and Chapala. This is looking back, the Christian Science reading room here, and the feeling of that Paseo going up to the Arlington. The storefronts along Victoria. And we have not, by the way, on this, we know there's a lot of development to this architecture. It's just really, at this point, I believe, a massing study. The more direct view, looking at that Paseo more head-on or parallel with State Street. And then finally looking at the rear of the project, and here you can see the Canary Island palms, how we're proposing to relocate those, and this is basically the back of house for the market. So this is where our recycling and trash, etc., will be, and the seagulls. Yeah. Oh, I have one more view which shows you the view from Chapala looking back. These are the views that we showed you also at our last presentation, but I think it's helpful to see how we've revised them. This really helps to show that way that we have stepped down the mass of the market and introduced it's a little hard to see behind the tree, but introduced this architectural element as the entrance on the Chapala Street side, and then of course the murals. We studied the notion of possibly stepping the murals, but felt strongly, especially talking with Pam and Tim, that they really wanted to be placed back the way they were, and so hence the sloping sandstone wall that kind of creates a base to those. This is that back view looking more or less from up towards Sola down Chapala. So we just want to keep a beautiful little simple traditional wall element around that trash enclosure area that's next to the easement. And then again, you can see here very clearly those flanking Canary Island palms. That's the main entrance looking at the courtyard from Victoria. This is that bridge element that links the roof of the market to the residential units. We've modified this extensively. You can see that we've tried to create a little more sense of entry for the residential courtyard. So we have this public courtyard, which is at the market entrance, and then for the residents and their guests, you would go into kind of an inner courtyard. And Bob will talk about that in more detail. This gives a sense of the massing along Victoria. Again, there's a lot of work to do there architecturally, but it's generally, I think the feeling there is to keep the building simple. I showed you last time the picture of the hotel on East Victoria that I think is just a lovely example of scale along there.
Before you go from this page, one of the things that I think is important about these elevations is that in the El Pueblo Viejo guidelines, in the new guidelines, there's quite a bit of discussion about paseos and linking new paseos with existing paseos, and that's something that we've tried to do here. You've got the paseo that runs from Victoria to Sola. You've got an opportunity, which is not used now because it's a very, very narrow exit from the Arlington Theater outside, and we have a wall that's on our property now, so people can't walk along that side. And that's something that we've tried to do by setting back our building 8 feet and planting that will be an access point for people when they leave the theater to be able to walk, connect to the paseo that is currently from Victoria to Sola, and also to be able to walk, through the project up to the commercial piece and down into the parking garage. So we've we've extended that notion, as you can see. Brian, can you point back to the entrance on the back side of the building?
Right here.
Right. So you can see that paseo is from Victoria to Sola, that is currently part of the Arlington, and we're linking our paseo in the interior of our building with that. So we're trying to be very mindful of that notion as well.
So I think that's a good segue into Bob's presentation, just to give you guys relevant dimensions here. The distance of the Arlington mass to the property line right now, or to that little 60s masonry wall that runs along there, is just a little over 11 feet, or somewhere in that neighborhood. And we are stepping our buildings back between 16 feet to, in the closest proximity, 8 feet to that property line. So the closest the buildings come relative to each other is about 18, it looks like 18 and a half feet. And back over here we have about 26 feet. And obviously all along there you can see we're enhancing that current condition, which is basically the 42-inch high wall and asphalt and loading area. We're enhancing that area with landscaping. So Bob, before you begin, these are the two perspective views looking at that relationship between the Arlington. One that is from the State Street side, which is this one, and that's kind of what Marge was talking about. We're gonna work to open this little narrow condition up in this area with the landscaping and pavement, although it really isn't depicted there, so that that's more comfortable. And then this is the view looking back towards State Street from the Chapala Street side. That's, of course, the Paseo looking back up to the Arlington. And I, putting in my sort of final pitch here, I think that space wants to be a Paseo that has buildings on both sides. Right now you have the loading zone of Safeway, or what was the loading zone of Safeway, but it's just a big, vast expanse of pavement and a very ugly relationship. And now you create kind of this cascading buildings that lead up to, obviously, the beautiful Arlington Tower, which I believe was the way it was intended to be. So, Bob?
Thank you, Brian. I'll just briefly overview what's changed since you saw this before. Essentially, the landscaping along the Arlington has not changed. I believe, though, Brian, we are expanding the walkway here. Correct?
We want to, yes. And
So-
we did, Bob, from the last time we were here, because this was an issue, we have opened this up more so that there is more space and landscaping in that
Right.
corner.
Right. So essentially, you've got a widened pathway along here that will more comfortably accommodate pedestrians, and it'll be ADA accessible as well. Excuse me. Along the Paseo from Victoria Street, in terms of plant materials and locations, nothing has changed. Along Victoria Street, we are still discussing with the Street Tree Advisory Committee what the new street tree will be. They have accepted that and endorsed our desire for a canopy tree. The discussions basically are revolving around the fact that there is parking along here, and we need to have a tree that's going to accommodate parking. But it's our hope that we'll have a nice rhythm of trees, basically framing the storefronts, opening up for the main entrance, and providing a nice pedestrian experience, some shade as opposed to the queen palms that are on the other side. On Chapala Street, the Street Tree Advisory Committee did designate Cedrella facilis, the Brazilian cigar box tree, as a street tree. It's a tall, nearly evergreen tree. You can see some 100-year-old examples of it in the 000 block of West Gutierrez Street, down by D'Angelo's and Ablett's. So that will be the tree along Chapala Street, and the placement of those trees will correspond to the pilasters and panels along this side of the market, so that we more or less frame the mural panels. If it doesn't show up on this plan, it's because we've got an old plan and a new plan, but those will be adjusted accordingly. Additionally, the parkway strip along Chapala Street, because it's a no parking zone, will be left open and landscaped with drought tolerant materials, so it'll be a much more favorable environment to the street trees than currently exists. The two Canary Island palms that we've got on the site now exist currently at this location and this location. This one is 16 feet tall, brown trunk, and this one is 12 feet. We're proposing to move the 16-footer to this spot and the 12-footer to this spot. They won't be moved directly on site. They'll be taken off site, stored, and replaced once construction will accommodate that. The roof of the market building, again, doesn't exactly correspond with what Brian's plan shows. However, the tree locations are pretty close to correct. The trees on the top of the market building are a choice of olive or New Zealand Christmas tree, these locations, and crepe myrtles here. Those trees will be probably 12 to 15 feet tall at maturity and in large boxes. They can be controlled fairly easily with good pruning to keep them low to accommodate views. This area in here has changed substantially, and with, as Brian mentioned, our ability to go down to Mother Earth with some planting areas, we're hoping to put in a fairly large spreading canopy tree on the south end of the, or east-west end of the this commercial space here, and another taller, more open tree over this courtyard in here. This is the more or less private courtyard leading into the residential units. This is a very public courtyard.
So that's that area that we bring down into the parking structure below,
right,
for Earth.
We've also added a number of raised planters along the paseos where we expect a lot of user access. Back in here is a service access, so we're not proposing any planting there. But in the public areas, a lot of planting. The raised planters will be between 18 inches and 3 feet high or deep, if you will. They're all over structure, but we expect that we'll be able to get materials that will be up to 12 feet in places, so that we've got a sense of spatial division and some shade.
So let me just close with just real quickly.
I'm not done.
Yes, you are. I understand what's going on in this community as well as anybody, and the concern about the buildings on Chapala. And I have to tell you, in all earnest and sincerity, this is not one of the buildings along Chapala, other than the fact that it's on Chapala. This is a building that we have tried to address the concerns that those buildings have brought forth. On the street, we have 1- and 2-story massing, not 3-story. Nowhere do we have 3-story massing on the street. And if you'll take a moment, and I'll shoot whatever view you want me to of this model, when you take a moment and look at how this building is perceived from the street, the 3rd stories that seem to be of such concern, at least from what I am gathering from the conversation about the historic report, are merely peeking up behind the 1- and 2-story massing. If I built a 2-story building on this site up to the street or near to it, you wouldn't see any of those buildings. But the fact that we have 1-story massing allows that. So please understand that we have taken to very serious concern the community outrage about those buildings, and we've tried to design a building here that from a massing standpoint is very, very different.
Thank you. We are running behind. I don't ask you to not say something, but I would like you not to repeat if you. But first, let's have questions, please. Yes.
Could you give me an idea of how deep this is, this loading area, and how much
Murray,
it covers?
if you would come here and point here for the camera.
Sorry.
Let me go ahead.
It's on page A1 of the market.
Okay. This area?
Yes. How much does it cover the back of the Arlington? 60 feet.
Okay. From the loading area or the wall of the building?
Wall of the building.
Okay, the wall of the building, 28, 29 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Murray?
So, could you point out exactly how many of the buildings are the 3 stories and the 2 stories and the 1 story?
Yeah.
I think there was one that had
This
that.
probably is the easiest to
Yeah.
see. So the ones that are faded out are 1 story.
Mhm.
The roofs that you see are 2 stories, and then the remaining white are 3 stories.
So these are all 3 stories. Okay.
Mr. Pujol.
I have a couple of questions. One is about, I have more questions about the green roof. How does it work specifically as an open space? You know, like, is it like a passive space for recreation? And how do you access that exactly? You mentioned something, but I kind of got lost. I'm not sure how you go from one of these residences to the upper.
Probably shows best on the second floor plan, Alex. So this is We actually, I won't get into this in detail, but we kind of flip the circulation. On the third floor, we have this bridge that is serving the exits, and the two exit stairs from the third floor are over here, and then we flip that and bring the exits down to this end so that we don't have the bridge at the second floor, so it's only at that third floor level. So this circulation system then connects across the bridge that you saw from those views. And then, yes, the intent is to have a combination of green space that is passive green space and then walkway space. So someone can go up there and meditate or walk with friends or do whatever. And then, of course, it has a relationship to the club room as well.
These are the planters with the trees.
So it does also have it does have a certain formality. So you have some plans for it, like you have visualized something.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to put benches up there, and we're going to make it a place, it's that people can use.
Okay, I also have another question about the paseos. Sometimes we see that in the paseos, perhaps you can see it here. We do have great paseos, but then later on, the applicant, the developer, usually comes and says, "Well, we need to put a gate because we're having some activities at night and so forth." So how do you deal with that, or do you have a commitment to not to do that?
Well, the outer paseos, this area here, and of course that existing paseo will all remain open, and this will remain open, connecting through. We do need to secure the residences, and so there will be a gate through that one portal that I showed you from that view, and then there will be some kind of a gate somewhere in this portal as well, so that they're secure, and obviously at the exit points that are along here, so that the inner courtyards at night will be secure. But the intent is to not, to have them open during the day so that people can walk through them, but only at night when you would have a vagrancy problem that you could close them off.
Okay, I have also another question. You added this other entry there, thank you. And how does it, is it like a separate entrance? Is it significant, or how? I mean, you have one entry here.
Well, let me, it actually
works well.
The way that this, again, the idea for this is that the market, of course, we want it to be flexible, but ultimately the idea is that the market is going to be multiple vendors. And so we're going to have a circulation system through here where vendors will occupy spaces within this market. So you'll have the cheese guy and the meat guy and the fish guy and the flower person, and that's the way it's going to work.
Okay, and one more thing. I don't know if I saw it the last time, but you do have residential on the second story here, right?
Yes, these three modules are 2 stories, and those are residential units.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Adams?
I have a couple of questions. Now, again, the green roof, what is the material on that green roof? This area of green roof, how does this function? Is that just vegetation?
That's just vegetation. So that's just really for rainwater cleansing and the environmental aspects of a green roof. All of these roofs, by the way, will go into a rainwater collection system. On this green roof, we have some hardscape and some green, all of which will be over the same system to retain the rainwater.
So I'm on this pathway, and then what? Can I step on this, or is that that's like lawn?
This is the only part you can't step on, right?
Right.
This will be similar to this, Robert, in terms of the sedums and such that you see on a traditional green roof. This will be a usable space. It will probably at least be 50% lawn.
But let me clarify one thing that Bob, this is where Bob said it's a little different. Because we stepped that portion down at the front, at the corner of Victoria and Chapala of the markets to create better views to the Arlington and just break up that massing. This is a break, a step, and so we are going to plant this roof out but not have people out there because we don't want to have a guardrail. This mass is taller and has a guardrail, so it will be the people portion. That'll just be visual green roof like this. And that's not completely clear on these plans right now, but that's the way the elevations are reflected.
Okay. And then the other question I had is, okay, so you're gonna try to hit it out of the park on leads. So the solar, where might the solar go? I don't know.
We're thinking the solar is the photovoltaics are going to be on top of the club room.
the clubroom, which is...
Do we show it there? Yeah, so we show it
on
there.
the second story.
Yeah.
On top of the second story.
Yeah, and we actually modeled that, and you can see on these views. Let me see where the clubroom shows up. It obviously shows up a little bit right here. So that's the roof of the clubroom. That you wouldn't; those panels would be below or at the level of the parapet, so they wouldn't be viewed from the street.
I have a couple of questions. Could you talk about those? There were some towers and elevators. Do you have elevators, and where are they?
I do, and so thank you, because I did forget to mention that. The elevator from the commercial parking comes up right here, and it stops at that level. So that little element right there, which is the stair up from the parking garage as well as the elevator, is just a little one-story building. That'll have a 12-foot high roof from the street level, and that you can kind of see in that view, and also here. And on the renderings, you can actually see that. Can you see that little building? It's basically right behind here. So that is the roof or the elevator for the commercial. The roof or the elevator for the residential is right here, and it goes all the way down to the parking garage and comes up to the third level. And I don't think it's somewhere.
And what's this?
Oh, that
structure
is
there?
just that entrance off of. That's just
Just the entrance
That's just
on
an
the-
architectural
Okay.
element to denote the entrance, and it's aligned with that bridge. So actually, the best place to see the elevator tower of the residential is probably, that would be a good place to see it. So there is that element that pops up. So there it is again, right there. But it's really, we don't want to advertise it as too much of a tower, obviously. We don't want to
And what's
compete.
this?
That's one of those architectural elements we're just really using to
They're
flank,
just
to
angled.
bookend this building and give it a little bit of articulation.
Okay.
Because one of the comments, I think, was that it was a little boxy before. And this would probably also serve as a rear employee entrance loading area for trucks that would be on the street.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Torres.
Just have a couple of questions about paseos. The paseo as it exists, divided by that 60s wall, the Arlington half is Arlington property?
No, the paseo actually is Arlington property.
Oh, okay.
But there obviously is easements for all these stores and things to feed into
So
that.
after a concert, it'll still be open?
Oh
and
yeah,
people have access
that wouldn't
to
be. The
Chapala
only
and-
place we would close it would be just this residential paseo system right here. So we'd have a gate at that point and this point, but this paseo would always remain open. This paseo, which is really going to be an enhanced paseo now that is sort of a back alley, would be open at all times.
Thank you.
As well as that one.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I have one question. It has to do with the planting in your paseo right up against the Arlington. How tall are the trees that you're planting in here?
There's a plan.
We've got 4 clusters of Mexican fan palms. At this end, this point here, and here. We're proposing 5 trees here, 3 here, 3 here, and 2 here.
My
Those,
concern is just how much of the Arlington they hide.
right.
As much as I love trees.
Okay. I'm assuming you all know what these are. They're the tall, skinny palms that we've got on State Street. We've got 4 other relatively tall trees. These are queen palms at this location, and this is close to the staircase at the Arlington. So the Mexican fan palms are going to be, ultimately 60 feet tall. The queens will be 40 to 50 feet tall. The other palms are windmill palms. I've never seen those taller than 30 feet, but in another lifetime we could see that. we haven't filled that space with a lot of lower growing material because we want to keep it light and open feeling. And I think that the palms, I'm hoping the palms will complement the theater rather than block it. Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have a question. When you're walking under the Paseo, how high is that walkway above your head?
Well, we're basically planning right now, I think, floor to floor is 10.3. Is that what we've been using?
11. Oh.
No, at the upper floors, I think that's right. It varies because this is sloping. So actually, we will have as much as probably
Very high at the very opening.
13 feet here, and then it may drop down to 11 or something.
So can you walk me through the Paseo and tell me the head height that I have above me as you walk through the Paseo?
Yeah, this, and let me just quickly go back to one of these views, because I think it shows the idea of the one off of Victoria, off of that Victoria Paseo. The idea here is to do a vaulted, or a barrel vault that would go all the way through from here to here. This is the bridge element across here, so at this point we'd have clearance of probably 10 feet, maybe a little bit less. And then it's open all through here. I mentioned that it's not shown on Bob's plan, but we have a small little bridge that's up at the third floor level, which, I should have done a view of that, but we think that that's going to be very romantic with that two-story sort of view back to the Arlington, and we position this actually so that it captures the balcony and light that is on that side now.
So if we look at the second story plan, should I not see the walkways above? So basically, and that would probably be the best way for you to explain.
So here it's open in that courtyard. You go through an archway to the courtyard that is the residential courtyard. You enter into a lobby, and then the walkway system is as you see it. So that's the portion that's completely open to the sky.
Thank you. We ready for comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to comment.
Okay.
I think this is, I hate to see the Arlington trammeled with in any way, but I think this is a really lovely answer to how to fill that space, and far better than the Vaughn's Shopping Center, and far better than the loading dock behind, and that the amplification of the walkway leading from Victoria into the Arlington is going to be a pleasure to see also. I expect it'll make those buildings along the front on State Street to clean up their act a little bit too. My only concern is the blocking of the back of the Arlington by the loading dock of the market. There was a concern with the Arlington Village. They moved, I think, quite a bit. They're building back so that soaring facade or the soaring rear of the Arlington could be viewed. I think a lot of it, if it's 30 feet, is going to be quite a blockage. I don't know if there's a solution to it architecturally, but I would hate to see that archway blocked. That's really my only objection to it. I think the amplification of these paseos is a really good thing and long overdue. And the way this has been designed to go, of course, you had the benefit of looking up, and the people that are trying to build the Arlington Village have the problem of looking down, which is I don't know how they're going to solve it. But that being said, I think this is really a lovely project. I would just like to know if there's a possible architectural solution to opening up the back of the Arlington Theater a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I concur that this is a very good project. I think that it has a ways to go in terms of architectural detailing and so forth. But I think it's ready to leave this commission and move on to the bigger leagues, to the planning commission and so forth. I think the mass bulk and scale issues, I'm perfectly comfortable with them. I agree with the applicant that this is not at all like the other Chapala projects that we have seen. It has nothing to do with Paseo Chapala or Chapala 1 or the Chapala Lofts. It's a different animal. It does have a totally different presentation to the street. I appreciate the improvements in the pedestrian aspects, especially on Chapala. I think the mass Balkan scale has been very carefully considered and resolved. And there are some architectural issues pending, but I think they should be resolved later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, would you like to go in order, or would someone like to skip around? Okay. Ms. Murray? Okay. Mr. Sharp?
Thank you. My concerns are somewhat the same as last time, meaning the lack of modulation along Victoria Street with the storefronts. And I know Brian mentioned several times that this is a work in progress. I don't think that 4 to 6 feet is adequate to try and give that village feeling that we're trying to get there. And it was mentioned by Tim and Pam that the Arlington was meant to be circled with commercial shops. It's my understanding that that was primarily 1 story, as we now have on State Street, and not 2 and 3 story, especially 2 right on essentially the back of the sidewalk. So the height that is being proposed and the density of that massing is of concern to me. I understand that there are these openings viewing from Victoria Street to the Arlington that are 10 or 12 feet wide. However, you move 2 or 3 feet off center of those and you have a massive building and no vision of the Arlington from Victoria Street on the sidewalk or in the vehicle. I still feel the project is denser than it should be, and also still feel that the architecture of the market building is not appropriate to the EPB district and the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll remind everybody of the compatibility analysis up on the wall if they want to frame their comments regarding that. Would you like to go, Ms. Murray?
Yeah. In regards with our compatibility issue, I really agree with what Mr. Sharp mentioned. I also vehemently agree that that the rear of the Arlington should be completely open, that all those truss enclosures and everything should be pulled back. If it's encroaching in there, it means the market is too big for the site. I also agree that market really is going to be a large building, and it's I still think the architecture is not compatible. The other, let's see, I go to the I want to see that elevations of that Chapala and West Victoria corner.
The elevation
or maybe that site, that preview will probably show it better. That one of those big scenes,
composite.
yeah, the composite, yeah. Let's see.
I think the composite.
The composite,
projects.
yeah.
The one where you have Piper's
yeah,
project.
maybe the composite or something that I could point.
Where did that go?
Yeah. This part, I think it just really should be open. So you see the whole side of the Arlington. That's a big deal. And this side, this is the part that really bothers me. I just feel it's not
Can you put it under the camera, please?
Yeah,
So we can all see.
okay.
Thanks.
This whole part of this building, I just wish there was a way it could completely be cut off and be rounded, so it has some, I don't know how to do, what architecture should be, but it should somehow relate to the corner building, the Science, Christian Science Manor building, which is also a modern building, something, some softening and some reduction of this corner. So you then have an opening. The courtyard there is very nice, but this part, I think it really takes away from that opening here. This part I feel should be opened, and so you have a sense of a kind of an arts corner view to the Arlington. I think because no matter how you design this, it has to be in coordination with the other project. The other project is retaining that arch at the corner of Sola and Chapala. And somewhere along that corner of Chapala and West Victoria on your side, I think you should have something that kind of coordinates that, as well as the corner of State and West Victoria. And I just feel that that market is just not there at all.
So this view.
This part, I just wish this whole thing would get away, and you do something that is, something that relates to the corner of State Street and also to the corner of Sola. So you have that sense of the Arlington at the center and some of the historic elements surrounding you. This thing is just completely incompatible with the church across the street, with the Arlington, with that's just how I feel. It's very sort of not cohesive, is my sense.
Can I ask for a point of clarification?
You want us to wait? Well, why don't we wait till the end of the comments?
I also would just throw a suggestion, if there was a way to reduce the amount of the mural. I just think some of it could be inside or something, because I think what's driving this architecture is the mural, and unfortunately that accommodation of the mural is not architecturally compatible with the Arlington. I mean, there's something has to work, and I don't know how you would work it. I don't have any good suggestion. I'm just saying maybe it could be on the other. I don't know. I just don't know. I just feel it's not compatible. We are talking about compatibility. As far as the size, bulk, and scale, I'm still uneasy about the 3 stories buildings and their size and bulk and the sense of spatial feeling that I had spoken before that I did not find in the report. So otherwise, there are many parts of this project that are good, and I do know that I agree. You're avoiding the Chafala one, and I agree with that. And I just have these other comments, especially what Mr. Sharp said, that the density is still an issue. Thanks.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
For me, you just took my thing.
Sorry.
One of the problems that I think we're all having with that market building is the mural. The mural is dictating the size and the shape of that building, and I don't know how to avoid that other than putting it back where it was. But I think that whole market building I don't really find compatible with our guidelines, including I don't want to get into architectural details, but I think that the project is too dense. I don't know if you can ease some of it by lowering plate heights or what, but to me it's just too much in this space. And I agree that the back of the Arlington should be, that view should be preserved. What happens when you come last? Everybody's already said it.
Oh, no. You simply could say, I agree, and wish to. Yes. Mr. Drury.
I would ask a question of the applicant. If you didn't have to deal with the mural, would that unfetter you a bit?
The mural doesn't have anything to do with the building. Our project description, what we wanted to do on the site was build a public market. And one of the things that I hope everybody takes into consideration is that this market's 15,700 feet. The current Vaughn's is 20,900 square feet. So the market is actually smaller than what's currently there. But what we tried to do is take traffic off of Victoria to quiet the street, because now you have all of these semis delivering on Victoria Street coming into the back of that Safeway, and mirror what is across the street, having more of a pedestrian, commercial, smaller shops, restaurant. So that's the additional square footage. Part of the additional square footage that we're doing is on Victoria Street, but also some of our commercial square footage is going toward things that are, covered spaces that nobody gets to utilize, that's part of the building, that we have to, under Measure E, count as our commercial square footage.
I'm always suggesting something heretical, perhaps, but I don't find that mural particularly compelling. I don't think it's a good example of anything, particularly. And so if it was put someplace, dare I say it, in storage, I'd be fine with that. Thank you.
We were asked by the city to preserve it, and so we tried to find the best place to do that so that people could still see it. And when we talked about potentially putting it in the garage where, people driving every day would see it, it was that it needed to be preserved in a situation where, right.
And I should mention, in that regard, I think the nature of the mural, if it is to be preserved, it has to be preserved in total because it tells a story. You can't separate the panels.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Jacobus.
In this city, as well as many others, there are numerous examples of murals that were preserved and moved to other locations. It's a piece of artwork. It is something that's movable. When they built that market, I don't think anybody ever thought that market would stand as many years as it did. The architecture was fairly cheesy and inexpensive to build. So I would think that if they could come up with an adequate way to either store the mural until they could find a location for it, or find another location somewhere in town, possibly. But it is not uncommon to move murals and preserve them in locations other than, because they are art, and art is generally movable.
It can be moved.
Thank you.
Chair, it seems to me that the applicant would really like to know that, because I've read the report and it seems like the mural was not just a structure of merit, but it was landmark worth it in so many different categories, right? So we need to kind of come to terms with that. This commission has to come to terms with that. I believe in the first meeting, the historians say that not only had to be preserved, but preserved in a very viewable place. And in that sense, Chapala was preferable to Victoria. So we did come, so if we want to send the applicant in a different direction, we really need to, think this very carefully and perhaps need the assistance of the historians. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you. I wanted to add my comments, mostly because...
Oh,
well, Mr. Adams, please do.
Yeah. I think the project is come along a little bit, but for me, it's not yet compatible. What you're missing especially on Victoria, is modulation in a much more dramatic way than what's going on. I appreciate some of the efforts, but that modulation, it doesn't feel like modulation. So I also think the architectural character of that corner market is not yet compatible with our guidelines. That needs work. I think the schematic of the big passive recreation roof garden needs work. I appreciate all your that roof that amount of space devoted to roof garden, but that somehow it just doesn't. It feels too formal, too much like a machine to me. It needs to that needs some work. But I would say that the things the biggest problems I have is modulation in the corner market. Just a couple things as you go up. Can we look at the landscape plan? Just here. I do like these stairs, but you might consider like a landing with the seating opportunity along that journey, somewhere here, breaking that up. I think it's about 7 or 8 feet.
No, it's only 6 feet.
6?
Yeah.
It feels like it's so much for a paseo, so I'd like to see that a little gentler with the landing if possible. The other thing is this roof garden here, just the plain roof garden, it needs some vertical character. Maybe that's citrus trees and pots. Maybe that's something to help break up the contemporary flatness of that shape.
It's not usable.
I know it's not usable, but it still needs some life to it. It still needs something more than a flat surface. So I think you need to study that, because the roof garden in concept works great, but just the flat space as a function is very functional, and to me that doesn't. I don't think it's going to read very well from the paseo or anything. I think it needs some kind of variety in there. I don't know what that is. I know it's not usable, but it seems very modern to me. I like the concept a lot, but I think that needs some work. I also feel that this corner here, very important corner, I feel that the...
Which corner? Sorry.
Oh, this is the
northern corner.
Northeast corner of the project, but somehow needs to be opened up. I like your ideas of the Washingtonia. Maybe some of those could be pulled around the corner. So what I'm seeing is trees sort of in a straight line. I'd like to see some those trees wrap a little bit more mystery rather than in such a straight line. If you're including them on that edge, the California native palm, Washingtonia foliifera, is it? What's the other? There's robusta and
Foliifera.
Foliifera, yeah. Those can be used on this project too. You may have thought about that, but those are a little bit stouter, maybe not a view blocker, but a little bit more presence. Anyway, I do like the Washingtonia species, but I think the right. Oh, and also I love the fact you're using the Phoenix canariensis over on that other side, transplanting those. That's great. But I feel like this needs to be opened up, and this needs to be modulated, and these buildings need to be seriously modulated. So, and then my last comment is the raised bridges with the railings, maybe some citrus pots. Again, something to break up that bridge railing element needs to be integrated a little bit. That can be worked on. But for me, my main concerns are modulation in the corner.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd love to throw wrenches in the works. I'd like to request two things. One is I'd like to request, Tim, could you come forward and address the issue as to whether the mural could be moved or off-site? And then I'd like to give the Commission some information that I feel I also need while Tim's coming forward. The landmark designation for the theater does not include the back wall. That was done intentionally. At the one point, they figured that they were going to create a concert center or whatever it was. They wanted to have a larger stage fly, much as they did at the Granada. So we need to keep in mind that that wall being important, we may need to go back to our designation subcommittee and request that be designated. It can't be made a condition of approval on this project because this is not the owner of the building, but possibly on the other project. But also, just to keep in mind that if we open that all the way up, there is the possibility, if we can't get that landmark, that they could someday possibly come in with a request to expand that stage fly. Hopefully that won't happen, but I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
May we respond? Thank you. As far as moving, as noted on page 43 of our historic structures sites report, we analyzed what the impact of the moving of what impact there would be from moving or altering the murals. And it's the conclusion that the project description, which will incorporate the murals into the project in an arrangement that meets their historic configuration, which is chronological from the Chumash to the mid-50s, that this would meet standards 1 and 2 of the Secretary of the Interior standards. Now, if the murals were moved off-site, that would require another analysis, and it's problematical that you could move them somewhere else that would preserve their setting. They were designed as an urban mural in the built environment. And so moving them, say, in a park surrounded by shrubbery or trees or landscaping wouldn't emulate their historic appearance. They were meant to be seen as part of the built environment. And separating them into individual panels would probably be a significant impact to their integrity, their ability to read as an example of mid-century public art. And while they're probably in many people's estimation rather schematic and sort of maybe not very attractive in contemporary aesthetics, they are the city's largest remaining and probably largest example from that time period where there was this attempt to incorporate public art into commercial and some public buildings. So we feel in the context of the city's sort of artistic history, they are very important. And by preserving them on site in their original arrangement, we're preserving that history. It's not necessary, of course, to put them and leave them right where they are, as long as we can maintain some relationship to the street grid and some relationship, ideally to the property they were commissioned for.
And I'd just like to add a comment. Stepping out of my role as an architectural historian and putting on my other role as an art historian. As the saying goes, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Some people may not appreciate the fact that these are somewhat, as Tim said, schematic and abstracted. They nevertheless were, an important example of Joseph Noll's work. It certainly reflects the time period and the style at that time. I think one of the also perhaps not appreciating them as we might when they're moved is that they're certainly not in a particularly attractive area for observation. The surrounding, we could say, vegetation doesn't enhance it. They haven't been cleaned. There are many, as I say, aesthetic avenues that could enhance it, and these are. Certainly, as Tim mentioned, probably the largest commission example of mosaic in the city. I think they're important, even though someone may not appreciate them from an aesthetic standpoint. One could say that about people who don't like Picasso either, and yet he certainly, would be considered, obviously a renowned and important artist. So I think moving them would negate the fact that these are landmarkable. They should be in, the general area where they were placed. They should be representative as an urban, in their urban environment, as an example of public art. Because if you move them to another location, you will lose their context. And I think that is an important example of. This is a very important example of public art for Santa Barbara.
Thank you. I will make some comments I don't think that are redundant to anyone. So I do not have a problem with the mass, bulk, and scale as an urban project and on Chapala. I do, however, have a problem with this project's adjacency to a landmark. It's not about its being on Chapala. I don't even know why that came up. Secondarily, I remember your comment about taking aerial views of the Andalusian village and sort of plopping them down. But what concerns me is that what I see are three very disparate elements. This large market, this little piece of commercial here, and then all of a sudden the Andalusian village plopped adjacent to each other. For me, urban planning is more about an integration of elements, and I don't see that integration here. And that's what I'm looking for. I find it disturbing to have this line here, and then to have this line become quite different, and then here. I don't see a real design happening here. I am disturbed additionally by the connection at the second floor level between this roof and these residences. When you talk about plopping down an Andalusian village, I don't think they had second floor walkways connecting between each other and to a commercial roof of a building. In general, I very much appreciate what you're trying to do, both your green goals as well as your desire not to annihilate street views, view sheds, or adjacency to the Arlington. But I am concerned about what I really feel is a lack of integration in terms of urban design. I'm going to look for a motion, and given what we had before, I'm not going to summarize the comments. I know the applicant is taking extensive notes between the four of you, but I will look for a motion regarding ours.
Motion to continue this project.
Second the motion.
Should I say indefinitely or 2 weeks or?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Although you didn't totally summarize the comments, I think what would be important to do is take a couple straw votes to ascertain whether this desire for changes to the project involve the size, bulk, and scale of the project, or whatever compatibility criteria needs to have work on. I think that would give more direction to the motion.
In terms of the size, bulk, and scale, how many of the commissioners believe that this is compatible? Two?
Two feel it's acceptable.
Compatible. Mr. Drury, that will be three. I'm going to throw in my pet little thing, which is how many of these people feel this is compatible with the adjacent landmark? Compatible with the adjacent landmark. That's one. Are there any other straw votes that you...
Let's weigh in on the mural.
All right. What would be the request?
What would be the way in? That the location and schematic of the mural is acceptable.
All right. All those who feel that the location...
Relatively acceptable.
Relatively acceptable. I think there's a solution there, yes.
What was the straw? What was it again? Stated.
If the location of the mural on Chapala Street on the face of a commercial building is appropriate, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And I think so. I think it could be massaged. It doesn't have to be like this. I support this.
So that means the remaining don't want to see the murals kept on site. Is that what that means?
Not so. This was
Okay.
Chapala Street.
Okay.
And then a straw vote.
Taken from myself.
How many would like to see the mural kept on site?
On site.
Yes, on site.
On site of the project.
Yes.
Okay.
And then a straw vote on appropriate amount of open space and landscaping.
How many feel there is an appropriate amount of open space?
Two.
How many feel there's an appropriate amount of landscaping?
Can I do it almost?
No.
Well, no, that's not quite. Four?
How many for landscaping?
Appropriate amount
Four.
of landscape.
Right.
I'm for that.
Does anyone feel they need to have their thoughts clarified or supported through a straw vote?
I think you did well.
Yeah. How are people feeling about the green roofs?
What would be your,
Are they appropriate?
in what way? The use
The way-
of the green roofs or the
No.
use of the green roof? as
The
a-
schematic, the layout.
The design of the
Yeah.
I think we all have problems with the architecture, but feel that maybe that's something we can look at. Or with some of the
Green roof was certainly supportable our last the architecture.
I think the layout needs work. Okay.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Can you clarify the motion? I understand.
Well, the thing I mean, the primary thing I need help on, and it is the foundation really of this project, which is to put back a market. And it's not a big market, it's a small market, particularly by today's standards. How then could you help me? Because I've heard the majority of the board say that the architecture is not compatible. And someone needs to explain how it is not compatible. I look at the building that's up at the corner of Sola, the little market, the A&P that was up there, that's still there as Magellan's. This building, if it were still in this condition today, would be considered a treasure in the community. How do you do? Can somebody help me with how it's not compatible? Because do you want the market to not look like a market? Do you want it to look like something else? Is that how I make it compatible? Because the guidelines talk merely about compatibility with specific architectural styles, so I need somebody to help me on that comment.
Mr. Sharp, would you like to clarify this? I think you were the most vocal opponent, unless I'm wrong.
Well, as I said last time,
I mean, let's go to the rendering. It's probably
There you go.
if this building was proposed afresh in an EPV district, without the mural or with the mural, with the broad expanses of unbroken glass, the severity of the concrete or plaster elements, vertical and horizontal, I don't think it could be approved.
that doesn't help me on how it's not compatible. It's a very simple building. It's not a complex building. It's a simple building. It's a market. And if we want markets in our downtown, do you want me to make it look like Ralph's? Is that what the idea?
Cornell, at a certain point, though.
Okay,
Madam Chair.
I need help, though.
In that sense, so let us
May
see
I
if we
just
can
read
speak.
something out of the urban design guidelines? That's paragraph 3.1.5. Corner buildings shall exhibit a strong visual and functional connection with the sidewalks of adjacent streets. This can be accomplished by placing entrances on each abutting street frontage or placing an entrance on the corner itself. That might be a step in the right direction.
We have one here
I know that.
and here.
I know that.
Madam Chair?
Other features, including windows at pedestrian height, wall detailing, and public art, shall also be used to provide visual interest. Well, you have public art.
And windows.
I know that, but it depends on how the windows are designed.
Okay, yes, Mr. Pujol. I'm sorry, Mr. Pujol was way ahead.
The one thing I would do if I were in your shoes is think that I have 6 panels, 6 bays, but you have 9 bays. So 6 can be one thing. The other 3 could address the corner. That's what I would do. They seem like you're stuck with 6 bays, not with 9.
I don't understand how I'm not addressing the corner. I understand that maybe people feel that there's too much glass. That would be a constructive comment if that's
I think that is the comment that Ms. Boucher was trying to make.
I feel that there's too much glass.
There you go.
That's a good stab at it.
But
I mean, just briefly, really briefly. Because I think it's important for people, for all of you to understand really what this is intended to be. And how we work it out in the midst of that is... The glass is about having transparency, that you can see through that corner is all, it will be the produce section of this market. So we want for people to see colorful, fresh, bright transparency. And we don't want the market to be dark. And if there's a way that we've tried to be sensitive because on I think it's Figueroa and Chapala, you have buildings that emulate these types of design features.
Is there, yes, Mr. Drury?
I've looked at it's page 5 on the little one. It's just it's the schema looking from Chapala straight back at the Arlington. I see that maybe we're just simply talking about those where those panels are very severe. They're just rectangles, and there's no architectural modulation except for the tower that's obscured by a tree in front of the Arlington rear, and from the entrance, I think that's the entrance down to Victoria. But those panels where this rather problematic mural is portrayed, they're just blocks. They're just.
But the murals are blocks. I don't mean.
You're asking for clarification. He's clarifying.
I'm just saying that if I'm at least reading this partly right, the difference between what we see behind and what we see in front is really a kind of extreme. Is that kind of what Commissioner Sharp is getting?
You're asking for, and you are giving your opinion, and.
So that's I'm just thinking that if there's a way to bring the frames of these panels into some sort of architectural compliance or the same kind of reading as what's behind the Andalusian village idea, I think that would go at least some way. Thank you.
And I'm in the minority opinion. The market is fine with me. I actually prefer the severity, particularly next to the Arlington, which is quite severe in a lot of ways. And I am of the school of thought of enlivening through, looking through a window to be quite acceptable to me. However, I am clearly in the minority.
Well, thank you. At least there's someone, because I was baffled if the entire board felt that way.
I am in the minority, so you
Madam
have to
Chair,
accept the.
It seems to me it's not the amount of glass; it's the way the glass is articulated.
So take that as a little guidance there.
Okay.
So I think you have a motion. I think there have been straw votes that give you some indication. And
Madam Chair, what was the motion? It was indefinitely continued to...
Yeah, indefinite.
Indefinite continued.
Well,
thank you.
We don't want
Okay, take that
No,
back.
take it back.
Please.
Yeah.
Let's do 4 weeks then. If something in that...
No,
does that work?
No,
You want 2 weeks?
We need to entitle this site. And I would like to, my feeling is that we're not going to make everybody on this commission happy with this project. This is an urban site. It's next to a historic landmark, but new projects need to be able to sit next to old projects and create their own moment in time. And we have worked very hard to do that on this project, and we're working with Pam and Tim. We have worked extensively with them on the architecture and massing. And it is very important. We own this site. There's no tenant in this site now as it sits. Vaughn's decided to leave. It is important for us to get this project entitled and built. There is a cost for us of doing business.
What is your request?
So my request is that we come back in 2 weeks.
Brian?
That's fine.
No sleep for you. All right. Please change that. Will you change your motion to, yes, 2 weeks?
See you all in 2 weeks.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Thank you.
I hope
My
the ghost
apologies
of
to
Joseph Knowles doesn't come
1316
and
State
strangle me in my
Street.
sleep.
Mr. Ancietto? Don't ever presume.
Don't let this obscure the fact that we generally think that it's a great step forward.
No, I'm not, but I just really...
I was going to say, now you know.
No, here it is. That's for the...
Where's the news press now that we need them? Where's the news press now that we need them? I don't know.
Madam Chair, are we officially on a break? Or?
No, but...
Apparently, everybody.
Everybody fled the room.
Don't forget to turn your mics on if you're chit-chatting.
There is no official break, but for some reason people left.
CTV's
They
turning the
knew.
volume down.
Well, you probably appreciate it.
No.
They probably need to go to facilities.
There is no break. Sit down, all. Took a break.
Anyway.
We do still have a quorum. I would like to continue. 1316 State Street.
Good afternoon. My name is Wally Ronquieto.
Thank you very much.
I am the owner of the building and proposing some wind shields for the patio.
Yes, and if I may, our last motion was continued 2 weeks with the comment that the applicant should consider a permanent steel frame with removable glass that is compatible with the style of architecture.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I think we may have achieved that. Let me turn it around so you can see it. This is kind of chronology of what we have been trying to do. This was the original proposal. This is existing. And this proposed for today. There was an additional proposal, basically had no way to be shown because it was invisible, which was the large pane of glass that was rejected last week. So what we are proposing now, actually there are two options, and within those two options there are some sub-options. So we have 4 different options to discuss today, so we probably can expedite the process of what is a compromise solution. So what we are doing today is very much following the recommendation on the 2 gates, that there will be smaller glass panes used in both gates. The smaller gate will be modified from the existing in a way that is going to be now going all the way up to the edge. And what we are proposing are basically, as I said, 2 options. One option is shown here, in where the upper part of the arch is fixed and permanent. The lower part, it can swing up, and it's shown here in this drawing. Swing up, flip up, so to open. So this will be a permanent installation, and as I said, the lower part of the window will be mounted on hinges, and it will swing up and it will be retained against the wall. That will require a thickening or widening of the wall in the lower part in order to support the lower part of the window. It can be left totally clear for simplicity and transparency, or we could attach, very much like on 1321 State Street by the Arlington, those, apparently they are made out of copper, and it makes it look like they are individual little glasses. The second proposal is the upper part stays fixed, the lower part is removable. So instead of swinging on hinges here, it will be just removed and stored. In which case there will no need to thicken the wall, because it will inset into the arch itself. Again, it can be clear for transparency, or it could have this reticle applied on it. And the third one is a way in where the separation between the fixed part and the removable part is done with a wider strip of metal there, and that will follow the shape of the moldings. In here, in the two previous ones, the moldings have been shortened, so there will be no need to have this metal trim there. We can see the details here. As I said, the doors, I think that we are all in agreement that we are offering what it was requested. Basically, there will be an L angle around the frame, and there will be T angles, metal angles, will allow the glass to slide in and out for cleaning, maintenance, and so on. On the smaller gate, same situation. There's a lip or an L angle here, T angles there, and again we'll slide the glasses, and there will be some retainers applied to make sure that the glass does not come out when the doors are operated. Here it shows the removal of the lower panel with some handles to make easy the removal. And in here we show how the molding is going to be reduced, so will allow the frame to go in and out and so on. This present shorter molding already exists in the building in several places. It's a duplication. Not always in the building the molding was protruding out. In many cases it was shortened. And here we are showing one that has that strip of metal that will follow the contour of the existing molding, in case you didn't think that the shortening of the molding was acceptable.
You thought of everything.
Pardon me?
You thought of everything.
Well, we're trying to find a situation, I mean, it gives you every possible option.
Are you done?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Is there a public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll come back to questions from the Commission. There are no questions on this. I'll take comments.
Just for the record, he's definitely gone above and beyond trying to give you all the choices.
I know, yes.
Which of these solutions do you feel would be the most practical,
For me, the most
sensible?
the most practical and sensible is the option where I can swing up the lower panel. It will cost me more to build because it requires the widening or the thickening of the walls, but it will allow me basically not to have to remove them and store it and get dirty, rusted, and Also, if it is, let's say we have a wonderful day and all of a sudden we have a bad wind, it will be much less complicated to close it than it will be to go look for screws and bolts and start attaching everything.
So, may I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I don't know where I'm saying this. Are you proposing that with the grid?
With the grid or without the grid?
Okay, thank you.
Well, I will take suggestions from the
Okay,
commission.
thank you.
Any other questions? Comments?
Well, it,
The top one, the F part of the windows will remain permanently.
Permanent forever there.
And then the other ones will swing up.
Or either swing up or can be removed out.
All right, thank you.
In the case of swinging, it requires a widening of the wall to support it. In the case of removal, then we don't have to do it.
Thank you.
it seems to me that this one is pretty much exactly what we asked for last time.
The middle one.
Well, it's the top of the two. Of the small things here, the top one is,
Point it out on the camera, and then everybody will know what you're talking about.
yeah, that one. That one.
So are you saying that you would have,
Well, we asked to have a permanent metal grid placed in the opening with the glass removable behind it. Isn't that what we asked for?
permanent steel frame with removable glass?
She means the ones to your right, Madam Chair. There you go.
Well, with
There
the
are
broken
options.
up, yeah, these are options of the same alternative. Mr. Sharp?
Another question.
Oh,
If you were to swing up, why would you have to shorten
On
the outside?
No, on the inside.
You show it shortened from the outside.
Here, because
And you
this
show
is-
it on the detail,
this
I
is a
believe, also.
permanent installation.
Pardon?
In this version here, we need to go in. We are inset in the arch. That's the one that doesn't require the widening of the wall because it's inset, so we need to cut the molding.
I'm talking about the capital detail. Well, let's go to sheet 3. Why do you have to cut back?
Because the spring comes all the way to
But
here.
this is out on Arlington Avenue.
Right.
You don't need to cut that back. You only need to cut it back where you start your window,
Right.
which could be at the very back and probably should be at the very back of the column.
It will be half of this arch here, the inset part of it will have molding, the other back half will not have molding. And we thought we will find that unacceptable. So the molding will get just to the frame and it will not continue around.
Okay, if this is the column, where is the window going to be?
Right here.
This is Arlington Avenue out here. Can the window be here?
In that case, we need to widen the wall, and then we still have to trim here and here the molding. It will be a notch missing.
Well, yeah, but your molding would still be
Right, but it would be
at least that much,
stopping
right?
abruptly here, or with some kind of trimming, but it will be cut here and there.
But the only disadvantage with having it here versus here is you have to extend the sill.
Well, and this part here will disappear because we need to pull it in and out.
I know, but if the window was back here,
Right.
you wouldn't have to cut that capital
Well, we'll cut it there.
to just that one little several inches, a
Because
couple
this
inches.
will look like this, right? So
Now
we
it
have to
does,
cut
yeah.
all this,
Yeah.
and then it will be from here. It will be cut there, and then it will be cut here.
Correct.
One corner.
Right. We could do it.
And that
Find it
that
acceptable.
corner, for the most part, up above is filled with window, and down below it's just a notch.
Right. If you find that acceptable, we'll certainly could do that too.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think just for clarification, Don, if I understand what you're saying is you want to make sure that that band is preserved on the outside where you're seeing it from State Street and all the way back to the back of the wall. So
There's no reason to take it out.
Right, so...
Except if you want to spend more money and ruin the effect.
Only because,
As I see
as I said, there will be a sudden stop there. And it will be, could be not clean. So then we leave the molding in the front and nothing in the arch. The arch will be totally clean to get things in and out, and there will be a cutoff. We thought that you would find that unacceptable, but if you find it acceptable, I'm certainly willing to do it that way.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just to help move things along again. So what you're saying is that if you do the version where the window swings up, that would be completely to the back of the arch.
But
the full molding would stay on the front and the sides until you get to the back of the arch where the glass
right,
would be.
Exactly. You are going to be missing a 90
But that's just at the very back of the arch. You're from the street, you see. So I think you're on the same plane. You're just not communicating as well.
Could be. Not the first time.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The motion last time says, continue 2 weeks with the comment that the applicant should consider a permanent seal frame with removable glass that is compatible with the style of the architecture.
Yes.
Okay, so are we approving a permanent steel frame?
Well, we're
That's
talking
what we
about
asked
it.
for?
The upper half.
We're talking about it. Mr. Peugeot.
The frame is permanent.
Yes.
I must confess, I'm a terrible cook. I really cannot cook. I mean, if you were to,
You
barbecue
I can
really
barbecue,
well.
I can barbecue. I cannot cook. But not everybody knows how to do everything. This is a specialty thing where you really need to have somebody that really can design this. Otherwise, you are at the mercy of what we can tell you, advise you here and there. This is the kind of project that should come here once and then go to consent and get finalized. Already bounced twice. And, you may get somewhere, but it's a comment here, a comment there. It's an important, it's a building in an important location. I think, it will be ahead, the city will be ahead if you consult with somebody that specializes in this type of architecture. That's what I can say. I really don't want to design it for you. I don't think it's proper for us to get that much. It's okay to assist people that need some help with some detail, but in this case, the details are everything. The concept that you wanted, the commission seemed to, most of the commission, not all of them, seems to go along with. You wanted a permanent installation with some removable parts. The commission says, yeah, but do it in wrought iron. Don't use aluminum, don't use wood. Do something that looks more like a garden structure. You got there. Now, to resolve these details, like I said, I'm not a cook. If you ask me to make a milanesa, you're not going to like it. It's okay. That's all I can say.
Are you suggesting that architect Busnelli is a great cook? That architect Busnelli is a great cook and a bad architect?
Well, I think you need to not necessarily real architecture. Somebody designs this.
Well, I'm getting the system from a professional architect. And I think the designer that is working, you might not appreciate his work, but I think he's a qualified architect. I find it rather offensive that you refer to a colleague in that way. May I suggest that in the future, those members of the Commission who are too personally or emotionally involved in these issues refrain from comment or voting?
Well, no, Mr. Ranchero, our rules are very clear. If he has a conflict of interest, there's a very strict and clear guideline, and it mostly has to do with whether he has any financial interest or if he lives nearby or that sort of thing. His personal feelings are not included in those guidelines.
Yeah, I think it's rather offensive to call the project last week that it was an architectural aberration.
Oh, no, I don't think he said that.
Yes,
I
he
think
did say
he was
that.
saying that in this particular case, what you're trying to do is not an easy thing to do. Not every architect would be qualified or experienced enough to think of a solution that would make this commission agree that this is something that you should do and can do. I don't think that's an insult. It's merely acknowledging that within our profession, there are some who are perhaps better qualified for whatever reason to figure this out.
That's kind of a dangerous statement.
Well, I will confess to you that I would find this a little bit of a head scratcher. I'm not saying that I'm any better or worse than anybody else. I don't think there are too many people that would find this easy. And it's no denigration of Mr. Busnelli. I know Mr. Busnelli. Not at all. And he should not think so, and you should not think so.
Well, his work was considered an architectural aberration last week, and now I'm told that there are some people that are great cooks and bad architects, and some people who are great architects but a bad cook. I think in a way it can be interpreted as an offense.
No, I don't think that's what Mr. Bourgeois was saying. He wasn't saying this or that. I think he was just noticing that within the range of cooks.
Yeah. I would say that because Mr. Bourgeois' involvement in the project, he's emotionally attached to it, and he probably has a very strong feelings and emotions, and I will request if he could probably be excused or be at least abstaining from making comments or voting on the project, because he seems to be really emotionally involved in the project.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think one of the things that appears to me, and I'm not an architect, is that this is a retrofit of a building that was approved that is now joined sort of the pantheon of many buildings in Santa Barbara. And as a retrofit, I can see that it's a much more problematic thing than if it was designed from the ground up. And so to make something that's compatible, that will serve your purposes, that will serve the purposes of the commission and accommodate what the guidelines of El Pueblo Viejo, is a difficult thing. And that's what I think Commissioner Peugeot is saying. And I would agree with that it's a complicated thing, because you want something that's going to be efficient. We want something that's going to be efficient and not destroy what we perceive as a successful building. And that's, I think, where the conflict comes in.
Right. I don't think, in all honesty, that I'm destroying anything. Not only I don't think I'm destroying anything, I think that basically I presented some plans, and I got suggestions from you, and I thought them over with great care. We had several meetings with architect Busnelli, and we thought we understood your concerns, and therefore we provided with a new design that will meet some of your concerns. So that's what I think I'm offering. Now, if I'm going to be a great cook for doing that and a poor architect, then I really feel like things are not working out, because I think I have made a very strong effort, not only myself, but Mr. Busnelli. We have spent hours and hours and hours thinking about all the possible concerns you have. And I think I have met every single one of the requirements, architecturally, functionally, and so on. And I'm giving you several options, which you were asking me which one is my favorite, and I said for the practicality of the use of the property, this is my favorite. But if you prefer to have a cleaner design, then I'm offering a second option. On that, I'm offering, would you like transparency? Here's the transparency. If you would like all look, then we can do this. I don't know what else. How am I destroying the property? I'm offering here that if you want to totally preserve the moldings, I'm willing to do a thicker design, very much like the School of Law, or, for example, your Rayman store on Victoria Street, the Victoria Hotel. They have this design which totally preserves the molding and has absolutely no impact. I see what else. I don't see how am I destroying anything.
That may have been an unfortunate choice of words. Just a moment. Mr. Jacobus, did you want to show me something?
I think that this whole thing could possibly be slided by a different type of drawing when it comes back. Something that's in perspective where you can see how the pieces actually fit together, how it fits behind the window, how maybe it notches. I think that Don and the applicant are thinking about the same thing, but the wording is not getting it clear, and the drawings aren't making it clear. So maybe if you came back with something that was, somewhat of a perspective showing how the glass would be behind the window, how it would notch, only to the very rear of this molding that Don's concerned about, So
but that was an option that he was asking, and I said I could accommodate that.
Right.
This was an element that would prevent having to do that, and since we have used this element in several parts in the restaurant right now, in the building, I see this as a duplication of other moldings that we have in the building. So I didn't think we needed to do the mulching and the cutting off.
Let me say this one more time. You have conditions on your exterior elevation where you have left the molding on one side and cut it back on another.
Sure.
That happened here on the corner, it happens here. Here you cut back the molding on both sides. That's sort of goofy. There's no reason that you have to cut the molding back other than notching it in that far inside corner enough to receive. You want if you're going to have the window that comes up like this, you want it to come down and be seated into either a steel T or
right.
Or something like that. And all you have to do is notch that one back corner either like this,
right.
and you've got your thing solved, and this elevation does look like the ones that are cut back here, but that's only from the inside, and it can be done, and you have to extend that base anyway on several of your sketches, and you've talked about doing that.
It can be done. I mean, this is goofy in the sense that it's shorter here and wider
exactly.
here. This is goofy because we are cutting off a corner, and there are three corners
but
that
from
are
the outside,
one that is missing.
From the outside on State in Arlington, you don't have anything that you can see that's cut off.
Right.
Everything's symmetrical, not unbalanced, such as you have here, and it seems like a fairly appropriate solution to me, given what you're trying to do and the fact that there's no easy solution, that's for sure.
Sure. That's totally doable.
Yes, Ms. Murray.
I guess the difficulty I was having was when you read the last minutes, which was the direction to the applicant, I was unable to see the execution of those minutes. So I think that was all.
Where do we stand now?
Well,
I'm not an architect, so I can't get involved in.
Can we say that you are satisfied with the designs of the gates?
I don't know that, and
You don't know
frankly,
that.
I don't think, if you don't mind, there's been too much dialogue, and I really need to have the commission decide what they would like to do. Mr. Schallenberger?
I would just like to suggest that maybe we can focus on the amount of lights that we're talking about, whether divided lights or single light. Well, there's nothing less than two lights, given the upper portion and the lower, but are we doing divided light, I guess, is the question.
Are you assuming, therefore, that the basic solution is acceptable? Otherwise, there's no point in talking about it.
Well, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, assuming it's one of these options, and I think what we told the applicant was a fixed frame it wasn't a fixed window, but it was something that's a permanent solution versus a bolted sort of flange connection that was the original sort of concept a month ago, I think it was. So now I think what we just need to do is decide, do we like the window breakups, the light breakups, and it looks like the applicant has responded appropriately by putting a plastered in return to a metal frame. That's what we want at the arch, at the infilled portion of this arched opening. That's, I think, an appropriate response and design. So from here, honestly, I don't care whether it's a swing or removable, because when the window is in place is, I think, the design that we need to consider. How they remove or create this open air pass-through is a method and not really a piece of architecture. So it doesn't really affect me that it swings up or that it's a removable panel. I don't think that's really something we need to consider. I think design-wise, I mean, just to provide comments, I would tend to lean toward the, well, actually, I would lean toward the original proposal with the biparting windows below and not even having a removable or an awning type swing. But I don't think we're there, so I'll go away from that. I don't like the headpiece in proposal 2 at the bottom.
Can you come here and perhaps point at this for the... Yes.
Well, that's
so
a little confusing.
He's going to point away.
I don't like the headpiece idea. I do like just a complete window system with a mullion here. And however, whether that's a panel that's removable or a swing is, I don't think, important. But architecturally, I don't like this headpiece here. I do agree with Mr. Sharp's comments that we don't need to do anything to the Arlington exterior portion, or the Arlington Way exterior portion for the plaster moldings. On the interior side, I'm less concerned about that. You could even remove them entirely on the interior. In fact, I don't like the idea of shrinking them in at all. I think that that's not really appropriate. If you're going to do anything, I would just remove them on the interior. And as far as the divided light proposals here, I don't think that these are as attractive as the single lights. Or maybe study the breakups a little bit. I think there's too many in this scenario. Maybe less divided lights would be a nice option or alternative to consider. Divided can look very nice, but I think there's too many in this proposal.
But if I can clarify, did you not say that you...
Well, I have no problem with that. I think that's actually a fantastic solution. I like a biparting window to create that opening. You're sticking with a more traditional window frame and a more traditional approach to infilling an arch, and I wouldn't have any problem with that. But I understand that these are all just comments, so I wanted to just provide my reaction to what I see here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think we really need to move this along.
I am going to ask if there are any more comments. If there are no more comments, I'm looking for a motion.
Can this go to consent? You have left it down?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is not the normal way of doing things, but it could. I think that there's just some misunderstanding going on here because we're not actually talking to the architect, we're talking with the person that's presenting the drawings. Maybe you could direct the architect to meet with staff so I could explain in person what it is that particularly Don. I understand exactly what Don Sharp's asking for. I don't think we're going to get that back to the architect unless we speak to the architect. So one possibility might be to have him come in, to make an appointment, come in, talk to me. I can give him the comments that you've provided, And I understand what Don's asking for, and perhaps that might be one way to solve this. But if we keep going with the middleman between us and the architect, we're not going to get to the root of the problem.
Well, that's also the presumption that everyone agrees with Mr. Sharp's proposal. Do I need a straw vote for that? All those who would be amenable to Mr. Sharp's proposal.
Which is how to treat the moldings.
Yes, how to treat the posing and where to place the window in relation to the arch depth. All those in...
I'm going to follow the applicant's decide when to abstain for this discussion.
Well, and if I may go on record with this. No. Personally, Mr. Ranchero, as chair, if I felt that Mr. Peugeot was out of line, was not being impartial, was not being civil, I would tell him so and ask him to abstain. I did not feel that. I feel he has been quite impartial and restrained. So I will honor his request to abstain, but I have no problem with Mr. Peugeot continuing to participate. And I think he could be very helpful. But he will abstain if he wishes. Mr. Schallenberger?
On this understanding Mr. Sharp's proposal or method of treating the moldings, I'd like to bring this extra setup because I made just a scratch note on it.
Flip it over.
And I just point out, because I think there is some confusion as to where the window sets in the depth of the arch. And if I could actually have that copy, I want to put it on the camera.
The sections.
Well, I don't want to draw on that one.
All right.
But so the issue here, I think Mr. Sharp was talking about bringing the window all the way back to the back of the column of the arch, which is beyond. But the bottom portion, there is no wall for it to sit on here. And I think Mr. Ranchado is saying that he was hoping to avoid building another wall below here. So if the exterior molding came back and died into the window frame at this point, it could still stay on the vertical support there, but you would still achieve the same effect where you keep the exterior view of the molding. And I'm not sure if is that what you had in mind? I wasn't clear from the conversation.
As I said, we had two options. One option is to have the window to be level with
right, I saw
the
in
wall.
the section there.
Yeah, we need to go to the next page.
Right.
For doing the
Yes.
swinging up, then we need to build up in order to match the thickness
Of the arch.
the column.
Okay.
Now, if we are going to have the removable approach, then we don't need to do the build-up because then the window can actually fit in without any modification. So you have
because of
those
the
are
weight.
the two options.
Yeah. Okay. I understand.
Mr. Sharp is saying that we should use on the outside with a build-up and then cut off the angle of the molding.
The bigger problem is that this mullion is going to be 2 or 3 times as wide as the other two in order to get the hinging or whatever apparatus you have, which is going to look more like this. If you can imagine this lower portion swinging up, attaching at the top, to where when you look through this glass, you're looking through 2 sets of grids. It's going to look very jail-like, and the bottom's going to look like this, and you're going to have this very heavy grid. Unless, even if you're looking straight on, you're going to see it, and the shadow's going to be in there, and this thing's going to be very, very dark and heavy and laborious, and that is my concern, is that 90% of the time you're going to have this major grid work hanging halfway, and it's unfortunate that it's half.
But the grid's
if it was
permanent,
1/3, 2/3, it would be much better, or 2/5, 3/5. But
that's why when
that is aesthetically, that's
one. I like the open, clear, with the swing for practicality. That's my choice when you ask me. Now, because I know some people may have a concern that it's too large of a glass pane, and that's why I offered the partition.
Which is what we asked for. The grid would be permanent.
One way would be to have this sunrise up above and clear down below, because then they're not competing and you're not getting that additional depth.
Sure.
So we have to imagine what it would be like to have 90% of the time or more, this half of it being in a sunrise at the very back of the column with those little ears clipped back slightly at the very back, and the sunrise above, which we don't have a sketch of, but we can certainly imagine. We do that for a living. So
this thing here basically
would be up there.
Up there.
Yeah,
If
and
you're looking from the inside, it would be like.
no, I can appreciate that. Right, which is going to look a little goofy on the inside.
Goofiness is everywhere.
But
He said goofiness is everywhere.
I think perhaps Mr. Sharp can make a motion, therefore.
Did you didn't want to finish that straw vote then?
Well, I think Mr. Sharp can make a motion because I think he's going to make it so that he's going to be seeing something.
yeah, I would make a motion that. Oh.
Thank you.
I think it should go to consent.
Thank you.
With the understanding that something can be worked out. But this isn't the forum to work out those details.
Right. And if you don't mind, would you amend your motion to include the fact that the upper part shall be the radius option? I think you're very right about the two grids and the interaction and the...
Yeah, there's no question about it. This
Yeah.
building, second floor, has that
Yes.
from the parking lot. I know.
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Sharp,
I'll second the
can you
motion.
please restate the motion.
The motion is to give the project conceptual approval with the upper panels being fixed.
We don't. It's a
All right.
approval.
Preliminary. It's hard to say. Preliminary approval with the upper panels being sunrise, steel, clear glass, single pane, and the bottom half either being removable or swing upable, clear, one piece of glass, and the project to go to consent for the details to be worked out.
2 weeks or 2 weeks, Mr. Arquero?
Yeah, I'm not so sure I know what consent is.
That would be Mr. Sharp.
I see, okay.
It's Susan and myself. We get you in a room, this
You
room.
have no idea what they do.
Mr. Drury has seconded it.
Is that 2 weeks?
Yes.
Make a suggestion to
Yes.
Just that
Ms. Ronquillo.
The proposal that when you come back, make the entire elevation what it is going to be. In other words, don't have options or
Right.
fill in all of those
I
arches
think I have
exactly
enough
like.
guidance now to know exactly what I'm supposed to.
Great.
All those in favor of this?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I'm not so sure that that is the proper sunrise.
Yes.
This is keyed in if that's into fourths. I would do some more research on possibly this building, and I mentioned 2 weeks ago they're all over town.
Right.
And successfully.
Oh yeah, I've seen it in the Arlington building, in the courtyard, in the back where they normally have the receptions. They have a beautiful.
Take a bunch of photographs, and we'll work it out.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Arquette, can I please ask you, since we've now sent you to final, which I think is a great movement on our part, I will repeat actually what Mr. Peugeot said, which is that because this is a retrofit, because this is a difficult thing to do, none of us are saying it's an easy thing to do. Mr. Busnelli and you have to pay a a lot of attention now to the details, because that is what will get you final. You cannot get over that hump without details that are thoughtful.
May I add, Madam Chair, that I think the architect should come to the consent calendar.
If that's possible, that would be
Sure,
helpful.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the consent calendar, when?
11 o'clock in this room,
Wednesday, 2
the
weeks.
day of the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shields, for waiting for your concept review. Item number 5, 702 Anacapa Street, Paradise.
I hope you have all your details.
He's like we shall be heading over there for margarita. Great
That's off the record. That's off the record. Hi, I'm Mark Shields, representing Paradise Cafe Design Arc. And we're coming in today for a conceptual review of the notion of building a trellis on the Anacapa Street side of the Paradise Cafe. I'm sure you're all familiar with the outer patio. And the primary reason is for better shade protection. There's a lot of problems with the umbrellas and people going around to one side of the table versus the other. And I was intrigued with the idea after going to the Paradise for so many years now. And I thought it might make a nicer sense of space out there, actually, a nicer place. And so Randy and I talked about what might be appropriate in terms of what would the trellis style be, how would it be built, that sort of thing. And I stood back and looked at the Paradise Cafe itself from across the street, and you guys are welcome to refresh your memories.
Did you make other photos, Mark? Oh.
I know. Anyway, and we thought that maybe the appropriate way to do a trellis would be to keep it very simple and light, and build it out of wood, possibly maybe 5x5s, not something typical, slightly on the Victorian side of things. Paint it white. We're also considering the notion of white canvas awning that would be retractable, that's on cables. So you've all seen that style of awning. And we can talk about the details later, but that's the basic concept. And the awning would be retractable on cloudy days or whatever, but primarily it's for sunshade. What else do we have to say about it? We like the notion of the double posts as a way to, maybe it's a nice detail to enclose the horizontal members that are equal per each bay. So there's 3 bays, and there'll be a horizontal beam going back at each bay, which divides the awning up into 3 sections. And so that's primarily kind of what we're thinking, and we thought we'd come in and see what you guys think about it and get your reaction.
Yes.
Is there any public comment on this? Seeing none, are there any questions from the Commission?
There?
Yes.
Do you have an idea what the color of the awning will be?
White.
You said white.
We're thinking white. It won't be bright white. It'll be an off-white. And the existing awning on the entrance to the Paradise Cafe is green, just a little bit of red, and white stripes. And we thought, well, we could duplicate that over there, but that seemed to get really busy.
Yeah.
And when I look at the project, especially from across the street, you see the whiteness of the Victorian architecture, and it seems like the simpler the better to us. And that's why we're thinking, even though the white, we're going to have to clean it more often, seemed like a nice, fresh, inviting way to go.
Personally, I think it's a great project. I like the Victorian. It's a scaled down Victorian, but more than Victorian than Craftsman, in terms of I would say like a little chamfering on the post, a 5x5. Yes,
a little something.
Just but minute detail, painted white. I think that I like the double post. I'm not. I think you're keeping the upper members all at the same level, which there's a conflict, especially at the end, because you're keeping. You're not sure which one will.
We'd be doing a little trick detail there where we do it and we notch them, rather than having the typical lay one on top of the other, which is something we can discuss, but it's just slightly refined. So when you really study it, it's been carefully worked out.
I like the concept, personally, and I'm supportive of that.
I want to weigh in on the white. To me, what I love about Patio of the Paradise is the vegetation. That's dark. I think a stained wood would be my feeling. To me, that would be more transparent. I don't care so much for the top, but I think what I like about the Paradise is, and the architecture is what it is, but the mural's beautiful. It's just that outdoor environment. I just want to weigh in. I think stained wood's the way to go on it. I don't have a preference about the top.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The idea of the Paradise is too that it's got that funny mural on the outside, and there's a certain sense of weathering. I suppose it doesn't have to be brilliant white anyway. The posts, they could be washed white. They could be a number of ways to go to sort of push it back a little bit and not make it so brilliant.
Well, the basic idea was to have, as you look from the street to the corner looking in, is to have the trellis almost disappear into the white Victorian behind it.
Yeah, I agree with
and that was kind of that light area, as little mass as possible, so that it does in fact support the canvas awning, but it's not boom. There's a big structure there. That was kind of where we're trying to go.
Yes.
I like the white.
Thank you.
I think we should give these people a really hard time.
Are you looking for a motion then, unless there are contrary?
Let me ask a question.
Uh-huh.
Have you made any provisions for future heaters?
No.
This always comes up later after the thing is built, and if you could double up on this beam and do something to maybe have a band of heaters across there that would be hidden up in there, I would give it some thought anyway.
We have some ideas about heat that we're still talking about. Thank you for mentioning that.
This is the time to think about it.
And how about lighting? If
And lighting.
have this outside in the winter, at night.
Well, currently we have lighting that is uplighting, landscape lighting that lights into the hedges, and that seems to provide enough ambient light as a rule. In the nighttime, of course, the tables are candles. So.
I'd like to leave this up for a preliminary approval, and I'm going to send them in punishment to the consent calendar in 2 weeks to work at the details.
Second. Continue 2 weeks to consent.
That's a good question, but because we do have those massive edges and Birds of Paradise going up vertically already, because my wife loves those, we have it at home, and it drives me nuts because they get dirty really fast.
Mm-hmm. I have a motion and a second on the table. Madam Boucher, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
So preliminary?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to say that this architect is at least as good as the cook in the restaurant. Okay, so
there's hope. There's hope. There's hope. Great. Well, thank you.